The explosion hit during the third repetition of the live fire drill. Adrian Kwan felt the percussion wave before he heard it, a pressure change that made his teeth ache and his medical bag slide 6 inches across the concrete floor of the training observation post. 200 meters away, black smoke billowed from the Breacher training course, where someone had miscalculated the charge size. Adrian was moving before the debris stopped falling. His boots hit the stairs at a run, medical bag already open, gloved hands ready. Behind him, hospital corpsman First Class Derek Vaughn called out something about waiting for the all-clear. Adrian kept moving. The smoke meant fire. Fire meant burns. Burns meant seconds mattered. He reached the course perimeter as the first SEAL emerged from the smoke, supporting a teammate whose left arm hung at a wrong angle. Adrian guided them both to the ground with practiced efficiency, his hands already assessing the fracture. Compound, radius, and ulna. The bone ends hadn't broken skin, but the swelling was immediate. How bad is it? The injured SEAL asked. His name was Petty Officer Cortez, and his breathing was controlled despite the pain. "You will be fine," Adrian said. His voice was quiet, almost lost in the ambient noise of the base. He had the arm splinted and wrapped in 90 seconds, his movements precise and economical. The morphine auto-injector clicked against Cortez's thigh. "That will help." More SEALs emerged from the smoke. Adrian moved between them, checking pupils, assessing for concussion, clearing them one by one. None of the injuries were serious. The explosion had been dramatic, but the safety protocols had worked. Within 8 minutes, Adrian had evaluated all 12 men and cleared 10 of them to return to duty. Vaughn arrived with the ambulance crew and immediately began rechecking Adrian's work. He did this every time, his movements deliberately slow and theatrical, as though Adrian might have missed something critical. The other corpsmen on base had stopped noticing this behavior. Adrian had never commented on it. "You cleared Ramirez for duty," Vaughn said, examining the SEAL in question. His tone carried an edge that everyone in earshot could hear. "You sure about that? Head injuries can be subtle. Pupils equal and reactive," Adrian replied. "No nystagmus, no confusion, no headache, no potopovia." Impact was the shoulder and chest only. Vaughn made a show of performing his own neurological exam, while Ramirez stood patiently, a faint smile on his face. The SEAL had worked with Adrian for 11 months and trusted his judgment completely. After 2 full minutes, Vaughn stepped back and announced that yes, Ramirez appeared fine. "Good eyes, Daquan," Ramirez said as he walked away. Adrian gave a brief nod. The injured SEALs were loaded for transport to the base hospital. Adrian was cleaning his equipment when he noticed the dog. It was a stray that lived somewhere on the base perimeter, a German Shepherd mix that the SEALs occasionally fed. The animal was limping, favoring its right rear leg, and had moved into the shade beneath a parked Humvee. Adrian approached slowly, letting the dog see him coming. The animal's ears went back, but it didn't growl. He crouched 3 feet away and opened his bag, removing the last of his field rations from lunch. The dog's nose twitched. Adrian set the food down and moved back. While the dog ate, Adrian observed its movement. The limp was pronounced. When the food was gone, he moved closer again, speaking in the same quiet tone he used with injured sailors. The dog allowed him to examine the leg. No break. Probable soft tissue injury. Adrian wrapped it carefully with an elastic bandage from his kit, firm enough to provide support, but not so tight as to restrict circulation. The dog licked his hand once, then limped away with noticeably improved gait. "Seriously," Vaughn said from behind him. Adrian had not heard him approach. "You just used Navy medical supplies on a random dog?" "It was injured," Adrian replied. "It is a stray. It is not your responsibility." Adrian closed his bag without responding. He had learned that Vaughn interpreted silence as weakness, but he had also learned that engaging in these exchanges accomplished nothing. Vaughn wanted confrontation. Adrian refused to provide it. The afternoon training cycle proceeded without incident. Adrian remained at the medical post, available but unneeded. He used the time to restock his bag and update his medical logs. His handwriting was small and precise. He documented everything. At 1600 hours, the base loudspeakers crackled to life with an announcement that had become routine over the past weeks. All SEAL Team 7 personnel and attached support staff report to the team room immediately. Medical personnel are required to attend. Adrian secured his station and headed across the compound. The team room was already filling when he arrived. He took his usual position along the back wall, standing rather than sitting, ready to respond if needed during whatever briefing was about to occur. Vaughn entered moments later and made a point of standing directly in front of Adrian, blocking his view. Senior Chief Marcus Holland noticed and gestured for Vaughn to move to the side. The older man's expression was neutral, but his meaning was clear. Vaughn complied, his jaw tight. Before we dive into the briefing, Commander Reese said from the front of the room, "I want to acknowledge something. Drop a comment if you're watching this and let us know what state you are from. Maybe you have witnessed similar acts of courage where you live, or maybe you have family who served. The military community is strong because of people everywhere supporting it." The room settled into alert silence as Lieutenant Commander James Reese stepped to the front. The SEAL commander was lean and economical in his movements, a man who had spent 20 years learning to eliminate everything unnecessary from his life. He held a tablet, and his expression was serious. "Gentlemen," Reese began, "and Maya," he added with a nod to Petty Officer First Class Maya Torres, the only female operator in the room. "We have a situation developing in Baja California. 2 American journalists entered Mexico 4 days ago working on a story about cartel activity. They missed their scheduled check-in 36 hours ago. Intelligence confirms they're being held at a compound approximately 150 miles south of the border." The room's energy shifted immediately. This was not another drill. "We have a 48-hour window," Reese continued. "After that, intelligence suggests they will be moved to a secondary location we cannot track. Extraction after that point becomes exponentially more difficult." Adrian listened from his position against the wall, his mind already running through medical scenarios he might encounter. Hostages held for 36 hours could be dehydrated, injured from interrogation, or suffering from existing medical conditions without access to medication. "Mission brief is at 0600 tomorrow," Reese said. "All personnel assigned to Team 7 are to consider themselves activated. Medical, I need you mission ready with full trauma capabilities." Adrian met the commander's eyes briefly and nodded once. The room began to disperse. Adrian was heading for the door when Senior Chief Holland caught his arm. The gesture was gentle but deliberate. "Doc," Holland said quietly. His voice was gravelly from years of shouting over helicopter rotors and gunfire. "You good for this?" "Yes, Senior Chief." Holland studied him for a moment longer than necessary. The older man had a reputation for reading people, for seeing things others missed. "I have watched you work for almost a year now," he said. "You are steady. That matters on operations like this." "Thank you, Senior Chief." Adrian left the team room and headed for the medical facility to prepare his gear. The base was transitioning into evening, the California sun dropping toward the Pacific. He had 12 hours to ensure everything was ready. 12 hours before the mission brief that would set everything in motion. He did not know yet that in less than 24 hours, he would be standing in front of that same room, revealing a truth he had kept hidden for 18 months. He did not know that the quiet competence he had cultivated so carefully was about to be shattered by a single impossible question. All he knew was that 2 Americans needed extraction, and he would be ready to keep them alive when the team brought them home. Adrian was in the medical facility at Ofavethry, laying out his gear with methodical precision. Trauma shears, hemostatic gauges, tourniquets, chest seals, nasopharyngeal airways for kits with multiple gauge options. Everything had its place in a modified MAL pack he would carry. Everything had been checked twice. The mission brief began exactly at 0600. The team room was packed, every operator and support staff member present. Adrian stood in his usual position along the wall, his pack at his feet. Vaughn had arrived early and taken a seat in the front row, making a show of his preparedness. Commander Reese activated the large monitor at the front of the room. Satellite imagery appeared, showing a compound in harsh desert terrain. The The resolution was remarkable. Adrian could see individual vehicles and structures. This is the target, Reese said. Former ranch property, now controlled by cartel cell operating out of Tijuana. Intelligence indicates the journalists are being held in the main building here. He highlighted a central structure with a laser pointer. We have thermal confirmation of multiple heat signatures in that location. What is the security posture? Maya Torres asked from her seat near the front. Reese clicked to the next image. Roving patrols, approximately 6 to 8 armed personnel at any given time. They rotate every 4 hours. The compound has limited sight lines due to the terrain, which works in our favor for approach. The challenge is extraction. The next slide showed topographical maps. The compound sat in a depression surrounded by rocky hills and dense desert scrub. Road access was limited to a single dirt track that wound through the terrain for miles. Ground extraction is not viable, Reese continued. The access road is too exposed and too long. By the time we secure the hostages and reached any reasonable pickup point, response forces would be on us. He paused for emphasis. This is an air operation. Chief Warrant Officer Ryan Blake stood from his seat. Blake was the team's senior helicopter pilot, a veteran of hundreds of combat missions. He studied the terrain carefully before speaking. Landing zone options are limited, Blake said. The compound itself has a small, cleared area here. He pointed to a spot on the imagery. But it is tight. Very tight. We would be committed the moment we touch down. How tight? Senior Chief Holland asked. Blake pulled up additional measurements. 30 meters by 40 meters, surrounded by structures and equipment. Margin for error is minimal. He looked at Reese directly. I can do it, but it needs to be perfect conditions. Any wind above 10 knots, and it becomes significantly more dangerous. Reese nodded. Weather forecast shows clear conditions for the next 72 hours. Wind projections are favorable. The briefing continued for another hour. Insertion timing, approach vectors, contingency plans, rules of engagement. Adrian absorbed it all, his mind cataloging the medical implications of each scenario. The hostages had been held for almost 2 full days now. Dehydration was certain. Possible injuries from restraints. Potential trauma from interrogation. He would need to be ready for anything. Equipment check is at 1400, Reese announced. We insert at 0300 tomorrow. That gives us darkness for approach and extraction and puts us back across the border before dawn. Questions? Who is flying? One of the younger SEALs asked. Chief Blake, Reese replied, with Petty Officer Garrison as co-pilot. Blake nodded confirmation. The MH-60 is prepped and ready. We will do a full systems check this afternoon. The briefing concluded. Adrian was gathering his pack when Vaughn approached, his expression skeptical. You ever been on a hot extraction before, Doc? Vaughn asked. His voice carried across the room, drawing attention. No, Adrian replied. Vaughn smiled without warmth. It is not like the training exercises. When round are coming in and everyone is screaming and the bird is shaking from rotor wash, things get chaotic. You sure you can handle that? I would do my job, Adrian said. Senior Chief Holland intervened before Vaughn could respond. Doc Quan has been downrange before, Vaughn. Check his record. Afghanistan, attached to Marine units. He has seen combat. Vaughn's expression flickered with surprise, then settled back into dismissiveness. That was what? Medical aid stations? This is direct action. Holland's voice remained level, but gained an edge. When you have been doing this as long as I have, you learn to recognize people who stay calm when everything goes sideways. Doc Juan is one of those people. He turned to Adrian. You good, Doc? Yes, Senior Chief. Holland walked away. Vaughn lingered a moment longer, as if deciding whether to press the issue, then followed. Adrian returned to organizing his gear. The afternoon equipment check proceeded smoothly. Adrian presented his medical pack for inspection, and Commander Reese went through it item by item, asking questions about quantities and applications. The commander's knowledge of combat medicine was extensive. When he finished, he looked at Adrian directly. This is solid work, Reese said. You have thought through the scenarios. Thank you, sir. You have been with us 11 months now. Reese's tone was conversational, but his attention was focused. Holland speaks highly of you. Says you're the calmest person he has worked with under pressure. Adrian did not respond immediately, uncertain if a response was expected. That is a rare quality, Reese continued, especially in someone who stays as quiet as you do. Makes me wonder what you're thinking about. Just focused on being ready, sir. Reese studied him for another moment, then nodded. Good. We need that tomorrow. The team moved to the flight line for the helicopter inspection. The MH-60 Seahawk sat on the tarmac, its rotors folded back, crew chiefs performing final maintenance checks. Blake was underneath the aircraft with a flashlight, personally inspecting the landing gear. Adrian stood with the other support personnel, watching the preparations. The helicopter was beautiful in its functionality, every line and component designed for a specific purpose. He found himself cataloging the systems from memory. Engine configuration, fuel capacity, rotor specifications, emergency procedures. The information was there, filed away in a part of his mind he had deliberately ignored for 18 months. Maya Torres appeared beside him. She had a habit of moving quietly, a skill that served her well in her role. You know birds, she said. It was not quite a question. Adrian hesitated. A little. Most medics do not look at helicopters the way you do. She kept her voice low, meant only for him. Like you were reading them, just familiar with them from Afghanistan. Maya nodded slowly. Her expression suggested she did not quite believe him, but she did not push. If you ever want to talk about it, she said, I am around. Before Adrian could respond, a shout came from near the helicopter. Blake had been climbing down from the aircraft inspection when his foot slipped on the mounting step. His weight shifted wrong, and he fell 8 feet onto the tarmac. The sound of impact was sickeningly loud. Adrian was running before Blake hit the ground. He reached the pilot in seconds, already assessing. Blake was conscious, but his face was twisted in pain. His right leg was bent at an unnatural angle below the knee, and even through the flight suit, Adrian could see the rapid swelling. Do not move, Adrian said quietly. He was already signaling for a stretcher, his hands carefully palpating the injury. Compound fracture, tibia, and fibula. The bone ends were displaced, but had not broken through skin. Yet, Blake's breathing was rapid and shallow. The mission, he managed through gritted teeth. Worry about yourself right now. Chief, Adrian replied. He had the leg stabilized in less than a minute, using an inflatable splint from his ever-present medical bag. The morphine injection followed immediately. You're going to be fine, but you're done flying for at least 3 months. The stretcher arrived, and Adrian supervised the transfer, maintaining stabilization throughout. Within 8 minutes, Blake was in an ambulance heading for the base hospital. Adrian stood on the tarmac, his hands still gloved, watching the vehicle disappear. Commander Reese approached, his expression grim. How bad? Displaced compound fracture. He will need surgery and pins. 6 to 8 weeks minimum recovery. Likely longer before he is cleared for flight status. Reese exhaled slowly. The mission window closes in 44 hours. Yes, sir. The commander pulled out his radio. I need to contact Naval Air Station North Island. Get a replacement pilot here, ASAP. He keyed the mic and made the request. The response came back within 2 minutes. The nearest qualified pilot available was Lieutenant Davis, currently finishing a training evolution in Nevada. Estimated arrival time, 6 hours. Reese checked his watch. That puts us at 20 to 100 hours tonight. Then pre-flight briefing, systems check, final mission prep. He calculated silently. It could work. Tight, but possible. The team began dispersing. The energy of the afternoon suddenly deflated. Adrian returned his equipment to the medical facility and spent the evening rechecking everything again. At 2100 hours, he was in his quarters trying to rest when his phone buzzed. Message from Commander Reese. Lieutenant Davis delayed. Maintenance issue with transport. New ETA, 0400 tomorrow. Adrian stared at the message. 0400 was 1 hour after their planned insertion time. The mission would have to be pushed back, shrinking the window even further. He set the phone down and closed his eyes, but sleep would not come. At 20:20, another message arrived. Davis transport cannot fly. Mechanical failure grounded. Next available pilot is Chief Warrant Officer Martinez from Lemoore. ETA, Ohio tomorrow morning. The mission window was collapsing. By the time Martinez arrived, received a briefing, familiarized himself with the aircraft and terrain, and completed pre-flight checks, they would be launching in daylight. The entire operational plan was built around darkness. Adrian rose from his rack and walked to the window. Across the compound, lights were still on in the team room. He could see figures moving inside. Commander Reese would be scrambling for options, working every contact he had to find a solution. The helicopter sat alone on the flight line, rotors folded, waiting for a pilot who could fly it into one of the most dangerous insertions imaginable. Adrian looked at it for a long time, feeling the weight of a choice he had avoided for 18 months pressing down on him. 2 American journalists were running out of time. A SEAL team was ready to go, and the only thing standing between them and the mission was 8 feet of tarmac and 1 pilot with a broken leg. Adrian turned away from the window and tried again to sleep, knowing that in 7 hours he would stand in front of that team and speak words that would change everything. The emergency meeting convened at 0600. Adrian had not slept. He arrived at the team room, carrying his medical pack and a decision that sat heavy in his chest. The room was already full, every operator present despite the early hour. The tension was palpable. Commander Reese stood at the front, his face showing the strain of a night spent exhausting every option. Senior Chief Holland was beside him, arms crossed, expression grim. The satellite imagery of the compound still glowed on the monitor behind them. Gentlemen, and Maya, Reese began without preamble. We have a problem. Chief Warrant Officer Martinez cannot make it here before 1400 hours. By the time we brief him, complete pre-flight checks, and launch, we are looking at a night insertion tomorrow at the earliest. That puts us at 72 hours since the journalists were taken. He paused, letting the implications settle over the room. Intelligence updated 1 hour ago. Communications intercepts suggest the hostages will be moved to a secondary location today, sometime in the next 12 hours. Once that happens, we lose them. Our window is not closing. It is already closed. The room erupted in frustrated voices. SEALs who had spent all night preparing for a mission that was now evaporating. Vaughn was the loudest, suggesting they find civilian helicopter pilots, contract someone, do anything to get the bird in the air. Reese raised his hand for silence. Believe me, we have explored every option. There are no qualified military pilots within range who can get here in time. Civilian contractors would require clearances we do not have time to process. We are out of moves. Senior Chief Holland spoke up, his gravelly voice cutting through the disappointment. What about the hostages? Do we have any other options for extraction? Reese shook his head. Ground vehicles would take 16 hours round trip on those roads. They would see us coming from miles away. Without air support, this mission is not viable. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each team member. I am sorry. We did everything we could. Adrian felt his heart pounding. He had known this moment was coming since he received the first message last night. He had spent 7 hours rehearsing what he would say, how he would explain. His hands were steady, but his mouth was dry. The room began to shift, operators standing to leave, the energy of a canceled mission settling over everyone. Adrian took one step forward, then another. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out first. Senior Chief Holland noticed him moving and held up a hand. Hold on, everyone. Doc has something. All eyes turned to Adrian. He had never felt more exposed in his life. Vaughn was staring at him with open confusion. Maya Torres had a strange expression, as though she had been waiting for this exact moment. Commander Reese looked at him directly. Doc Quan? Adrian cleared his throat. The words felt impossible, but he forced them out anyway. Sir, before I joined the Navy, I flew helicopters. Civilian contractor in Afghanistan. 6 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Someone in the back of the room actually laughed, a short bark of disbelief that died immediately when no one else joined in. Vaughn stood up, his face flushed. Are you serious right now? This is not the time for jokes, Quan. We just lost our mission window. I'm not joking, Adrian replied quietly. I have over 1,800 flight hours, most of them in combat zones. I can fly the Seahawk. Reese's expression was unreadable. You're a hospital corpsman second class. Your record shows medical training only. There is no mention of any flight qualification. No, sir. I did not disclose it when I enlisted. I wanted to leave that life behind, but I maintain my licenses. They are still current. The commander studied him for a long moment. Why would you hide something like that? Adrian hesitated. The truth was complicated, wrapped in guilt and choices he had spent 18 months trying to forget. Because the work I did as a contractor, it was not something I was proud of. I was good at my job, but I enabled missions that resulted in civilian casualties. I wanted to serve in a way that saved lives instead of facilitating their loss. So I became a medic. Vaughn was on his feet now, voice rising. This is insane. You expect us to trust our lives and this mission to someone who claims he can fly, but has been hiding it for over a year? He gestured at Adrian dismissively. Even if you're telling the truth, you have not touched a helicopter in 18 months. You would be rusty, dangerous. This is suicide. Senior Chief Holland's voice cut through the room. Vaughn, sit down. The order was quiet but absolute. Vaughn sat, his jaw clenched. Reese addressed Adrian again. You said you can fly the Seahawk specifically? Yes, sir. I have flight time in the MH-60 series. Not naval variant specifically, but the systems are nearly identical to the Army's Black Hawks I flew most often. How much Black Hawk time? Approximately 1,400 hours. The room stirred. That was not amateur hour. That was professional pilot time. Maya Torres spoke up from her seat. Commander, if Doc Quan is telling the truth, his personnel file should have records of his contractor employment. Background checks would have flagged it during security clearance. Reese was already on his tablet, accessing databases. It took him less than 3 minutes. He read silently, his expression shifting from skepticism to surprise. Adrian Quan, employed by Raptor Aviation Services from 2016 to 2022. Multiple deployments to Afghanistan. Primary aircraft, UH-60 Black Hawk. He looked up. This is all accurate? Yes, sir. And you maintained your licenses? Yes, sir. I renewed them 6 months ago. I told myself it was just to keep the option available, but I never intended to use them again. Reese set down the tablet. Walk me through your qualifications. Quickly. Adrian took a breath. FAA commercial helicopter license with instrument rating. Military competency certification from contractor training. Qualified in UH-60 Alpha, Lima, and Mike variants. Night vision goggles certified. Combat flight certified. Qualified in tactical insertion and extraction, including hot landing zones under fire. Vaughn stood again despite Holland's warning look. Commander, this is crazy. We do not have time to verify any of this. He could be making it all up. Then let me prove it, Adrian said. Take me to the aircraft. Ask me anything. Systems, procedures, emergency protocols. If I cannot answer, you'll know I am lying. Reese checked his watch. The mission window was still open, barely. If Adrian was telling the truth, they could launch within 2 hours. If he was lying or incompetent, they would know quickly. The commander made his decision. Everyone to the flight line. Now, the team moved as one unit, flooding out of the team room and across the compound. Adrian walked in the center of the group, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on him. Vaughn was close behind, practically radiating hostility. Maya Torres appeared at his side, her voice low. I knew you were hiding something, she said. Did not expect this. The Seahawk waited on the tarmac, exactly as it had been left the night before. Adrian approached it slowly, letting his eyes track over the airframe. The muscle memory was already returning, his brain automatically cataloging what he saw. Commander Reese stood beside the aircraft. Okay, document impressed me. Adrian walked around the helicopter, speaking as he moved. MH-60S Seahawk. 2 General Electric T700GE 401C turboshaft engines, each producing approximately 1,700 shaft horsepower. Maximum gross weight, just under 23,000 pounds. He pointed to specific components as he named them. That is your main transmission, oil cooler here, hydraulic reservoirs. Tail rotor gearbox is back there with a separate hydraulic system for redundancy. He continued without pause. Flight controls use a conventional helicopter configuration. Cyclic stick for pitch and roll, collective for thrust, and altitude, pedals for yaw. The 60 Sierra variant has a 4-axis autopilot system with automatic stabilization. Reese followed him, asking questions. What is the emergency procedure for engine failure in hover? Lower collective immediately to enter auto rotation. Apply aft cyclic to decrease rate of descent. Level the aircraft near ground effect. Cushion landing with collective at the last moment. If you have altitude, you aim for a clear area and execute a running landing if possible. What about tail rotor failure? Reduce collective to minimize torque effect. Enter auto rotation if altitude permits. Maintain forward airspeed to keep tail effectiveness through translational lift. Land into the wind if possible. Expect the aircraft to weather vane at touchdown. Senior Chief Holland was watching Adrian's face as he spoke, seeing something shift in the younger man's demeanor. The quiet, almost invisible medic was being replaced by someone else. Someone confident and precise. Reese pointed to the instrument panel visible through the cockpit window. Talk me through your pre-flight checks. Adrian climbed up to the pilot's seat and began the litany. Battery check, verify voltages. Engine and transmission oil levels. Hydraulic pressure. Flight control freedom and response. Navigation systems initialization. He continued for 3 full minutes, detailing every step of the pre-flight procedure without hesitation. When he finished, the ramp was silent. Even Vaughn had stopped protesting. How long since you have actually flown? Reese asked. 18 months, 2 weeks. But it does not leave you, sir. I can start the engines right now and fly this aircraft. The commander looked at Senior Chief Holland. The older SEAL's expression was thoughtful. Your call, Commander, Holland said. But I believe him. Reese turned to the assembled team. This is not a democracy, but I value your input. We put Doc Quan in that seat. We are trusting him with all our lives. Anyone has serious objections, speak now. The team exchanged looks. Maya Torres spoke first. I trust him. One by one, the other SEALs nodded agreement. The only person who remained silent was Vaughn. He looked around, realizing he was alone in his opposition, and finally gave a curt nod. Commander Reese faced Adrian directly. You have 90 minutes to do a complete pre-flight check and systems test. We launch at on 100. If anything feels wrong, you tell me immediately. Understood? Yes, sir. And Doc, when we get back, you and I are having a very long conversation about why you hid this. Yes, sir. The team dispersed to make final preparations. Adrian remained in the pilot's seat, his hands resting on controls he had told himself he would never touch again. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, but beneath it was something else, something that felt like purpose. Senior Chief Holland appeared beside the aircraft. You okay, Doc? Adrian looked at the older man, honestly. I do not know yet, Senior Chief. Ask me after we get those journalists home. Adrian ran through the pre-flight checklist with methodical precision. Every switch, every gauge, every system received his full attention. His hands moved across the controls with a familiarity that felt both foreign and natural after 18 months away. The muscle memory was intact. The instincts remained sharp, but something else had changed inside him during those months of deliberate silence. The crew chief, a young aviation machinist, mate named Petty Officer Chun, watched from the tarmac with undisguised curiosity. Word had spread across the base in minutes. The quiet medic who never said more than necessary was about to fly a combat mission. How does she feel? Chun asked as Adrian completed the hydraulic system check. Solid. Everything is reading normal. Adrian's voice had shifted into the clipped efficiency of a pilot focused on his aircraft. No discrepancies noted. Chun climbed up to hand Adrian the mission packet. Maps, coordinates, frequencies, authentication codes. The young sailor hesitated before speaking again. Doc, half the base is talking about this. They're saying you used to fly combat missions in Afghanistan. That is accurate. Why did you never say anything? Adrian secured the packet in a map case. Because I wanted to be known for what I do now, not what I did then. Before Chin could respond, Voices approached from across the tarmac. Adrian looked up to see Vaughn striding toward the helicopter, his expression dark. Senior Chief Holland was following at a distance, watching but not intervening. Vaughn stopped at the base of the aircraft and looked up at Adrian in the pilot's seat. "We need to talk. Now." Adrian climbed down, his movements calm despite the tension radiating from the other corpsmen. They walked several meters away from the helicopter, out of immediate earshot. "You think this makes you special," Vaughn said without preamble. "You think revealing your secret pilot past makes you some kind of hero. I think it makes me qualified to fly this mission." Vaughn stepped closer, his voice low and hard. "You lied on your enlistment paperwork. You concealed relevant qualifications. That is a violation of regulations. I could report you." "You could," Adrian replied evenly. "But you would be ending this mission and guaranteeing those journalists die. So you're holding them hostage. Do what I want or people die." Adrian met Vaughn's eyes directly. "No, I'm offering a capability that saves lives. What you do with that information is your choice." Vaughn's jaw clenched. "You know what I think? I think you washed out as a contractor. I think something happened over there that got you blacklisted and you're too ashamed to admit it. So you hid in the Navy as a medic, hoping no one would ever find out you failed at your real job." The words hit closer to home than Vaughn could have known. Adrian felt the familiar weight of guilt pressing down, memories of a mission that had gone catastrophically wrong. But he had spent 18 months learning to carry that weight without letting it consume him. "Believe what you want," Adrian said quietly. "In 90 minutes we launch. You can come on this mission and watch me prove myself, or you can stay here and file your report. Either way, I am flying that helicopter." Vaughn stared at him, searching for weakness, for any sign of the uncertain medic he thought he knew. When he found none, his expression shifted to something uglier. "If anything goes wrong up there, if anyone gets hurt because you're rusty or incompetent, I will make sure everyone knows it was your fault. You will never work in the military again." "Understood," Adrian said. Vaughn walked away, his shoulders rigid with frustration. Senior Chief Holland approached as the other corpsman disappeared into the hangar. "He is scared," Holland said simply. Adrian looked at the older SEAL with surprise. Holland continued. "Vaughn has spent his whole career following rules, checking boxes, doing everything by the book. Then you show up and quietly outperform him without trying. Now you reveal you have skills he could never match. It threatens everything he has built his identity on." "I'm not trying to threaten anyone, Senior Chief. I know that, but Vaughn does not see it that way. He sees you as proof that his way is not the only way, maybe not even the best way. That is terrifying for someone like him." Adrian absorbed this insight silently. He had never considered Vaughn's antagonism as anything other than personal dislike. Holland clapped him on the shoulder. "Finish your pre-flight document, and stop worrying about Vaughn. Worry about those journalists and this team. Everything else is noise." The senior chief walked away, leaving Adrian alone with the helicopter and his thoughts. He returned to the cockpit and continued his preparations. 45 minutes remained before launch. Maya Torres appeared carrying her gear. She would be acting as co-pilot and crew chief, a role she had trained for extensively. She climbed into the left seat and began her own systems checks without speaking. After several minutes of focused work, she finally broke the silence. "So, 1,800 hours of combat flying." Adrian adjusted the radio frequencies. "Yes, that is not hobby flying. That is professional level. It was my profession." Maya completed her checklist before turning to face him. "I looked you up after the briefing. Raptor Aviation Services. They contracted primarily with CIA and special operations. High-risk insertions, casualty evacuations, tactical support." "That is correct." She waited, but Adrian offered nothing more. Maya tried a different approach. "Why did you really leave?" Adrian's hands stilled on the controls. For a long moment, he considered deflecting, maintaining the privacy he had guarded so carefully. But something about Maya's directness, her lack of judgment, made him answer honestly. There was a mission, village in Helmand province. Intelligence said it was a Taliban meeting point. My job was to insert a team and wait for extraction. The team engaged targets in a compound. When I picked them up, I saw bodies. Women. Children. The intelligence was wrong. The team had hit a family gathering, not a military meeting. Maya listened without interrupting. I did not pull the triggers, Adrian continued, but I put the shooters in position. I got them out safely afterward. The investigation cleared everyone involved. Faulty intelligence, they said. Noronling. He paused, but those people were still dead, and I had enabled it. That was not your fault, Maya said. Maybe not legally, but morally, I could not separate myself from it. I realized I had spent 6 years facilitating violence, even when I thought it was justified violence. I wanted to spend the rest of my career doing the opposite, saving lives, healing instead of harming. So you became a corpsman. Yes, and I never wanted to fly again because every time I touched the controls, I would remember what I had enabled. Maya was quiet for a moment. And now you are about to fly a rescue mission to save innocent lives. That seems like redemption to me. Adrian looked at her directly. Or it is the universe giving me a chance to fail again in a different way. Only if you let it. Maya returned to her checklist. For what it is worth, I think you made the right choice. Both then and now. The remaining time passed quickly. The SEAL team arrived in full kit, weapons checked, game faces on. Commander Reese conducted a final brief, reviewing the plan one more time. Fast insertion, secure hostages, immediate extraction. Time on target estimated at 8 minutes maximum. Medical brief, Doc, Reese said. Adrian stood. Expectation is dehydration and possible trauma from restraints or interrogation. I am prepared for field stabilization of anything up to Class 4 trauma. Priority is load and go. Any treatment that can wait happens in flight or back at base. Reese nodded. Questions for the pilot? One of the younger SEALs raised his hand. Petty Officer Ramirez, the same operator Adrian had treated after the explosion. Doc, you could fly this? Adrian met his eyes. Yes. Good enough for me, Ramirez said. The team loaded into the helicopter, 8 operators plus Adrian and Maya. The weight distribution was carefully calculated. Every piece of gear had its place. Adrian ran through the final checklist one more time, then keyed the intercom. Crew, pilot. Pre-start checklist complete. Preparing to start engines. His hands moved through the sequence he had performed hundreds of times before. Battery on. Fuel pumps engaged. Engine 1 start. The turbine began its characteristic whine, building toward operating speed. 30 seconds later, Engine 2 followed. The rotor system engaged, blades beginning their rotation, slowly at first, then building to operational RPM. The familiar vibration of a living helicopter surrounded him. For 18 months, he had avoided this feeling. Now it felt like coming home. Tower, November 6, 4 requesting clearance for tactical departure. Adrian transmitted. November 6-4, you're cleared for tactical departure. Proceed on course. Adrian glanced at Maya. She gave him a thumbs up. He looked back at the SEAL team through the cabin. Every face was focused, professional, trusting him with their lives. He pulled collective, and the Seahawk lifted smoothly off the tarmac. The nose dipped slightly as he applied forward cyclic, and the aircraft transitioned to forward flight. Within seconds, they were climbing, turning south toward Mexico, toward 2 journalists who had no idea a rescue was coming. Vaughn was on the ground watching the departure. Adrian could see him standing alone on the tarmac, arms crossed, expression unreadable from this altitude. The California coast fell away behind them as they accelerated to cruise speed. The Pacific Ocean stretched out to their left, vast and indifferent. Ahead lay the border, the desert, and a landing zone that offered no margin for error. Adrian checked his instruments, confirmed his heading, and settled into the rhythm of flight. The fear was still there, the guilt still present. But beneath it was something stronger. Purpose. The chance to use his skills to save lives instead of enable their loss. Senior Chief Holland's voice crackled over the intercom. Smooth takeoff, document looking good. Adrian allowed himself the smallest smile. They were not there yet. They had not even crossed the border. But for the first time in 18 months, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The mission had begun. The border passed beneath them 23 minutes into the flight. No fanfare, no visible marker from altitude. Just the continuation of desert terrain that acknowledged no human boundaries. Adrian maintained a course that kept them low, following the natural contours of the landscape to minimize radar signature. Maya monitored the navigation systems while simultaneously managing communications with the command center back at Coronado. Her efficiency was impressive. She moved between tasks seamlessly, anticipating needs before they arose. Fuel status nominal, she reported. Estimated time to target area, 17 minutes. Copy, Adrian replied. Weather looks clear, but I'm seeing some wind shear indicators at lower altitude. Could get bumpy on approach. The SEALs in the back were silent, each man lost in his own pre-mission mental preparation. Adrian could see them through the cockpit divider, faces painted, weapons ready, eyes focused on something beyond the present moment. This was what they trained for, what they lived for. Commander Reese moved forward and tapped Adrian's shoulder. The commander wore a headset connected to the intercom. His voice came through clearly despite the rotor noise. How are you feeling, Doc? Good, sir. Aircraft is performing perfectly. That is not what I asked. Adrian considered the question. Focused. Ready. Maybe a little scared. Reese nodded approvingly. Good. Cocky pilots make mistakes. Scared pilots stay sharp. He paused. You have done hot extractions before? Yes, sir. Not in this specific aircraft variant, but the principles are identical. Talk me through what you are seeing ahead. Adrian gestured toward the windscreen. Terrain is getting rougher, more vertical relief. That limits their observation capability, but also restricts our approach vectors. Based on the satellite imagery, I will come in from the northwest following this ridgeline. He traced the route on the moving map display. That gives us cover until the last minute and puts the sun behind us if they look up. And a landing zone? 30 meters by 40 meters, surrounded by structures. I have memorized the layout. Primary concern is rotor clearance on the eastern side, where that equipment shed is positioned. Margin is less than 10 feet. Reese studied him carefully. You have flown into tighter spaces? Afghanistan had plenty of villages where landing zones were basically someone's backyard. This is manageable if the wind cooperates. The commander returned to the cabin. Adrian focused on his instruments, watching the terrain unfold below. The landscape was harsh, unforgiving. Rocky hills gave way to flatter desert, then climbed again into ridges that looked like the spine of some ancient creature. Target area in sight, Maya announced. 12 o'clock, 6 miles. Adrian spotted the compound. From this distance, it looked like any other collection of desert buildings. No obvious activity visible. He began his descent, following the ridgeline exactly as planned. The helicopter dropped lower, the ground rising to meet them. 2 miles out, Maya said, no radar emissions detected, no communications intercepts. They are quiet down there. That could mean they're not expecting trouble, or it could mean they're waiting for us, Adrian replied. Stay sharp. The approach was textbook perfect. Adrian used the terrain to mask their profile, keeping buildings and ridges between the helicopter and the compound until the last possible moment. When they finally broke over the final ridge, the compound was directly ahead, less than half a mile away. 30 seconds to target, Adrian called out. The SEAL team shifted instantly from stillness to readiness. Weapons came up. Eyes scanned for threats. Commander Reese positioned himself by the door, hand on the opening mechanism. Adrian could see the landing zone now. It looked even smaller from this angle than it had in the satellite photos. The equipment shed on the eastern side seemed to loom larger than he had anticipated. He adjusted his approach angle slightly, compensating for a crosswind that was pushing them toward the structure. 15 seconds. Movement on the ground. 2 men running from one building to another, carrying weapons. They had heard the helicopter. Surprise was lost. We are spotted, Maya reported calmly. 2 armed personnel visible, moving toward the main structure. Adrian focused on the landing. Everything else was noise. The helicopter descended, rotors churning the desert air into dust clouds. The landing zone came up fast. He could see the individual rocks, the tire tracks in the dirt, the rust on the equipment shed that was now less than 12 feet from his rotor tips. 5 seconds. He reduced airspeed, pulled back on the cyclic, increased collective to arrest the descent. The Seahawk flared perfectly, nose up, tail low, forward momentum bleeding away. The skids touched dirt with barely a bump. Wheels down, Adrian transmitted. The seals were already moving. Doors flew open and operators poured out in a choreographed rush. 8 men moving as one unit, flowing toward the main building with practiced efficiency. Commander Reese was first through the compound entrance, weapon up, scanning for threats. Adrian kept the engines at flight idle, rotors turning, ready for immediate departure. Maya had her weapon out, providing security through the cockpit windows. The waiting was always the hardest part, sitting exposed while others did the dangerous work. Contact. Reese's voice crackled over the radio. 3 armed hostiles neutralized. Moving to secure hostages. Adrian watched the seconds tick by on the chronometer. Every moment on the ground increased risk. His hands remained on the controls, feet on the pedals, ready to lift off instantly if needed. Hostages located, Reese reported. 2 individuals, alive, ambulatory with assistance. Preparing to move. How many hostiles remaining in compound? Maya asked. Unknown. Assume more are present. Expedite extraction. Through the dust and heat shimmer, Adrian saw the SEAL team emerging from the main building. They had 2 people between them, a man and a woman, both stumbling but moving under their own power. The journalists. The whole reason for this mission. Then the shooting started. Muzzle flashes erupted from a secondary building Adrian had not been tracking. Automatic weapons fire, poorly aimed but high volume. The SEALs returned fire immediately, controlled bursts that suppressed the threat. But more shooters appeared from a 3rd location. We're taking fire from multiple positions, Reese transmitted. His voice remained calm, but urgent. Get ready to go hot. Adrian's hands tightened on the controls. A hot extraction meant the team would be loading under fire, exposed, vulnerable. It meant he would need to keep the aircraft steady while bullets potentially found his fuselage. It meant everything could go wrong in seconds. The SEAL team was moving toward the helicopter, half providing covering fire while half assisted the hostages. The journalists were moving too slowly, weakened by their captivity. One of them fell, and 2 operators had to physically carry her. 50 meters from the aircraft. 40 meters. The incoming fire intensified. Adrian felt the first round hit the airframe. A metallic ping that was distinct even over the engine noise. Then another. The Seahawk was taking hits. We are hit, Maya reported, scanning her instruments. No critical systems showing damage yet. 30 meters. The team was almost there. Adrian could see their faces now, painted and focused. Ramirez was carrying the male journalist over his shoulder. Maya Torres had the woman in a fireman's carry. 20 meters. More rounds impacted the aircraft. One starred the windscreen, spiderwebbing the armored glass, but not penetrating. Adrian forced himself to remain still, to keep the helicopter stable despite every instinct screaming at him to take evasive action. The first operators reached the aircraft and began loading. Hostages were passed inside with urgent care. The security element maintained suppressing fire. Commander Reese was last man, backing toward the helicopter while engaging targets. Everyone in, Reese shouted. Adrian did not wait for confirmation. His hands moved before his mind fully processed the command. Collective up, cyclic forward, pedal input to counter torque. The Seahawk lifted from the desert floor, nose dipping as it transitioned to forward flight. A round hit the tail rotor assembly. Adrian felt the pedal response change instantly, the aircraft wanting to spin. He compensated with throttle and cyclic inputs, maintaining control through muscle memory and reflex. Tail rotor damage, he announced. Controllable, but degraded. We need altitude fast. The helicopter climbed, pulling away from the compound. Adrian could see cartel vehicles racing toward their position from the perimeter road. They had escaped with perhaps 60 seconds to spare. In the cabin behind him, Chaos reigned. The female journalist was unconscious. The male journalist was vomiting from dehydration. The SEALs were conducting immediate medical assessments while simultaneously checking their own gear and weapons. Maya was on the radio, transmitting their status to command. Successful extraction, 2 hostages recovered, aircraft damaged but flyable. Estimated time to base 90 minutes. Adrian focused on keeping them airborne. The tail rotor damage made the helicopter want a weather vane, requiring constant pedal pressure to maintain heading. His leg was already beginning to cramp from the sustained input. 90 minutes of this was going to be exhausting. Doc, Reese appeared at the cockpit divider again. Female hostage is critical. Unresponsive, weak pulse, severe dehydration. She needs immediate medical attention. Adrian's mind split into 2 tracks. Pilot and medic. He cannot be both simultaneously. If he left the controls to treat the patient, Maya could keep them airborne, but she lacked his experience. If he stayed in the pilot's seat, the woman might die before they reached base. Can you handle the controls? He asked Maya. She met his eyes. Not with the tail damage. I can do straight and level flight, but if we hit weather or need evasive maneuvering, I'm not qualified. Then she stays critical until we land, Adrian said. It was the hardest medical decision he had ever made, prioritizing the many over the one. Reese understood immediately. Do what you can from there. I will relay instructions to Vaughn in the back. Adrian twisted in his seat to see into the cabin. Vaughn was already working on the patient, his movements urgent but controlled. Despite everything between them, the other corpsman was competent. Vaughn, Adrian called out. Start in 4, wide open. 2 liters, normal saline. Check her blood glucose. If it is below 60, give her dextrose. Already on it, Vaughn shouted back. The coastline appeared ahead, the border approaching. They were going to make it. But the woman's life was still hanging in the balance, and Adrian was trapped in a seat, flying a damaged helicopter, unable to do what he had spent 18 months training for. Doc, Maya said quietly, you made the right call. If you leave those controls, we all die, including her. Adrian nodded, but the words rang hollow. Right call or not, he had just chosen to fly instead of heal. The exact opposite of why he had become a corpsman. The irony was not lost on him. Behind him, Vaughn worked frantically to save the patient Adrian could not reach. And somewhere in that moment, something shifted between them. Not friendship, not yet, but perhaps the first hint of understanding. Adrian's left leg was screaming. 40 minutes of constant pedal pressure to counter the damaged tail rotor had turned muscle fatigue into burning agony. He shifted his weight slightly, trying to distribute the load differently, but there was no relief. The helicopter demanded every bit of his attention. Maya monitored the fuel situation while keeping one eye on the instruments. We are burning more fuel than projected, she reported. The damage is creating drag. We will make it, but margins are tight. Copy. Adrian's voice was strained. How is the patient? He glanced back into the cabin. Vaughn was bent over the female journalist, working with intense focus. An 4-bag hung from a cargo strap overhead, fluids running wide open. The other corpsman's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking vitals, adjusting her position, monitoring her response. Vaughn looked up and met Adrian's eyes. Blood pressure is stabilizing. Glucose was 42, gave her 50 milliliters of D50. She is responding, but still unconscious. Her voice is hoarse. Severe dehydration, probable heat exhaustion, possible internal injuries I cannot assess in flight. Keep the fluids running. Watch her airway closely. Already am, Vaughn replied. There was no hostility in his tone now, just professional focus. The male journalist sat against the bulkhead, conscious but disoriented. Senior Chief Holland had given him water and was monitoring him carefully. The man kept trying to talk, to explain what had happened, but Holland quietly insisted he conserve his strength. Commander Reese moved to the cockpit again. His face was streaked with dust and sweat, but his voice remained steady. Status? Aircraft is flyable, but compromised. Adrian adjusted his grip on the cyclic, trying to ease the strain in his right hand. Tail rotor is providing maybe 60% effectiveness. I am compensating, but it is taking everything I have. We cannot afford any complications. Can you make it to Coronado? Yes, sir. But landing is going to be challenging. I will need a wide area with emergency services standing by. Reese keyed his radio and began coordinating with base operations. Adrian heard him requesting emergency services, ground crews, medical teams. The response came back immediately. Everything would be ready. The Pacific Ocean appeared ahead, a line of blue against the desert brown. They had crossed back into the United States without incident. The immediate danger was past, but the mission was not over. Maya checked her instruments again. Adrian, we have a weather system developing along the coast. Nothing severe, but wind gusts up to 20 knots. That is going to make your approach harder. He processed this information silently, landing a damaged helicopter in gusty winds with a critical patient on board. It was exactly the kind of scenario that flight instructors use to fail students. Except this was not a simulation. We will manage, he said simply. Senior Chief Holland appeared at the cockpit divider. Doc, I want you to know something. He waited until Adrian acknowledged him with a glance. What you did back there, staying in this seat instead of treating that woman, that was command decision-making. That was putting mission first. That is what we do. It does not feel right, Adrian admitted. It never does. But if you had left these controls, we would all be dead. That woman, both hostages, this whole team. You saved us by staying exactly where you are. Adrian wanted to believe that, but the guilt sat heavy. He had become a corpsman specifically to prioritize healing over everything else. And yet, at the critical moment, he had chosen to fly. The coastline grew closer. Naval Amphibious Base Coronado appeared on the horizon. The distinctive geography of the bay unmistakable. 20 minutes out. Vaughn's voice cut through the cabin noise. Adrian, I need your assessment. The patient's blood pressure is climbing too fast. Could be fluid overload, but I am worried about traumatic brain injury. She took a blow to the head at some point. Adrian twisted to look. Without being able to examine her directly, he had to rely on Vaughn's observations and his own experience. Pupils? Left pupil is slightly larger than right. Developed in the last 10 minutes. That was bad. That was increased intracranial pressure. That was a medical emergency requiring immediate intervention. Slow the 4 to keep Vainapin rate, Adrian instructed. Elevate her head 30 degrees. Monitor respiratory rate closely. If she starts showing Cushing's triad, we are in trouble. Already elevated. Respiratory rate is 14 and steady. Vaughn paused. What do you need me to do? Exactly what you're doing. Adrian met his eyes again. You're doing good work back there. Vaughn nodded once and returned to his patient. Something had shifted between them in the crucible of this mission. The antagonism had not disappeared, but it had been joined by something else. Mutual respect born from shared crisis. Maya pointed ahead. Base in sight. 10 miles out. Adrian keyed the radio. Coronado Tower, November 6-4, 10 miles north with battle damage. Requesting priority landing with emergency services standing by. November 6-4, Coronado Tower, you're cleared for straighten approach runway 29er. Emergency services are in position. Winds to Savenzro at 18 gusting 23. The wind was worse than expected. Adrian felt the helicopter buck slightly as they entered the wind shear layer near the coast. Every gust required immediate correction, and each correction stressed the damaged tail rotor further. Talk me through what you are seeing, Maya said quietly. Wind is hitting us from the left quarter. Normally I would compensate with tail rotor, but I do not have full authority. So I am using cyclic and collective inputs to maintain heading and altitude simultaneously. It is like juggling while someone is throwing extra balls at you. Can I help? Keep talking to me. Call out altitude and airspeed. I need to focus on feel right now. The base grew larger in the windscreen. Adrian could see the emergency vehicles positioned along the runway, red lights flashing. An ambulance, fire trucks, the full response package. They were expecting the worst. 5 miles out. Maya's voice was calm, professional. Altitude, 1,000 feet. Airspeed, 90 knots. Slight right drift. Adrian corrected the drift with a combination of cyclic and throttle input. The helicopter responded sluggishly, but predictably. He began a gradual descent, maintaining visual contact with the runway. In the cabin, Commander Reese had the team preparing for landing. Gear secured, patients stabilized as much as possible, everyone in crash positions just in case. This was textbook emergency procedure. 3 miles out, Maya continued. Altitude 500 feet, airspeed 70 knots, centerline looks good. A stronger gust hit them from the left. The helicopter yawed hard to the right, the damaged tail rotor unable to provide adequate correction. Adrian's foot slammed the left pedal to the floor, simultaneously adding power and forward cyclic. The aircraft shuddered, but came back under control. That was close, Maya breathed. 2 miles out. Altitude 300 feet, airspeed 60 knots. The runway was directly ahead now. Adrian could see people on the ground, watching their approach. He began the final descent, each foot of altitude loss requiring perfect control inputs. Vaughn called from the back. Patient is still stable, but barely. We need to land now. Working on it, Adrian replied through gritted teeth. 1 mile out. Maya's voice never wavered. Altitude 150 feet, airspeed 50 knots on glide path. Another gust. This one hit from behind, pushing them forward and down. Adrian pulled back on the cyclic, increased collective, fought the aircraft back to the correct approach angle. His leg was beyond pain now, operating on pure determination. Half mile. Altitude 75 feet, airspeed 40 knots. The runway threshold passed beneath them. Adrian reduced power, let the helicopter settle. The wind was still gusting, but he was in ground effect now, the cushion of air beneath the rotors providing slight additional stability. Over the numbers, Maya reported. Altitude 20 feet, airspeed 20 knots. Adrian could see individual faces in the crowd now. Pilots, crew chiefs, medical personnel, all watching. He blocked them out, focused only on the controls, the aircraft, the touchdown. 10 feet, 15 knots. He reduced collective fractionally. The skids descended toward the tarmac. 5 feet, 10 knots. Another gust tried to push them sideways. Adrian countered with cyclic, kept the descent rate steady. 3 feet, 5 knots. Almost there. The skids touched concrete with a hard bump. Not Adrian's smoothest landing, but they were down. Safe. He reduced collective to flight idle, began the shutdown sequence. On deck, Maya announced unnecessarily. Everyone was already moving. The cabin doors flew open and medical personnel swarmed aboard. Vaughn was directing them, providing patient history, ensuring continuity of care. The female journalist was loaded onto a stretcher and rushed to the waiting ambulance. The male journalist was helped out, walking but supported by corpsmen. Adrian completed the shutdown checklist with shaking hands. Engine 1 off. Engine 2 off. Rotors winding down. Battery off. He sat in the sudden relative silence, his body trembling with exhaustion. Maya reached over and squeezed his shoulder. You did it. You got us all home. He nodded, but could not speak yet. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him hollow. Commander Reese appeared at the cockpit. He did not say anything at first, just looked at Adrian with an expression that spoke volumes. Finally, he extended his hand. Outstanding work, document. Both as a pilot and as a leader. Adrian shook his hand weakly. The patient? Critical, but alive. She would be dead if not for what you and Vaughn did. What Vaughn did, Adrian corrected. I was stuck up here. You kept us flying, Reese said firmly. That allowed Vaughn to do his job. That is how teams work. The commander left to debrief with base operations. Adrian tried to stand, but his legs would not cooperate. The cramps hit all at once. Muscles that had been stressed beyond their limits now rebelling. Maya helped him out of the seat and down to the tarmac. Ground crews were already inspecting the damage. The tail rotor assembly was chewed up, multiple bullet strikes visible. One round had passed within inches of the drive shaft. If it had hit center, they would have lost tail rotor authority completely. Senior Chief Holland walked around the helicopter, shaking his head. You flew this bird 90 minutes with this kind of damage? Adrian leaned against the fuselage, letting it support his weight. Did not have much choice, Senior Chief. Holland looked at him with something approaching awe. Doc, I have been in this business for 24 years. I have flown with some of the best pilots in naval aviation. What you just did ranks up there with anything I have ever seen. Vaughn approached from the ambulance, his flight suit stained with blood and sweat. He stopped a few feet from Adrian, clearly uncertain how to proceed. The patient, Adrian asked, conscious now, talking, asking about the pilot who got her out. Vaughn paused. I told her it was the medic who learned to fly because he wanted to save lives instead of take them. Adrian looked at him in surprise. You were right, Vaughn continued quietly. And I was wrong. About you. About what matters. I spent so much time worrying about rules and protocols that I forgot why we do this job in the first place. We both did our jobs today, Adrian said. Yeah, but you did 2 jobs. And you did them both better than I could have done either one. Vaughn extended his hand. Adrian took it. The handshake was firm, genuine. As they stood there, exhausted and battered, emergency vehicles racing past them toward the hospital, Adrian felt something shift inside him. The guilt was still there. The memory of past failures had not disappeared. But maybe, just maybe, Senior Chief Holland was right. Maybe this was redemption. Not erasing the past, but building something better on top of it. He had flown again, and this time, everyone had lived. The debriefing room was crowded. Adrian sat at the long table flanked by Commander Reese and Senior Chief Holland. Across from them sat Captain Morrison, the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Group 1, along with 2 officers from Base Legal and a representative from Naval Air Forces. The atmosphere was formal, tense. Captain Morrison reviewed the mission report on his tablet, his expression unreadable. After several minutes of silence, he looked up at Adrian directly. Hospital Corpsman Second Class Quan, you concealed relevant qualifications during your enlistment process. You failed to disclose over 1,800 hours of rotary wing flight time and current FAA certifications. Do you dispute these facts? No, sir. I do not dispute them. Why did you conceal this information? Adrian had rehearsed this answer in his mind a dozen times during the past 3 hours. Because I wanted to serve as a medic, not as a pilot. My flight experience was connected to a period of my life I was trying to leave behind. That is not your decision to make, Morrison replied sharply. The Navy determines how best to utilize your skills. By concealing your qualifications, you deprive the service of a valuable asset. Yes, sir. Morrison leaned back in his chair. Under normal circumstances, concealment of this nature would result in administrative separation at minimum, possibly court-martial for fraudulent enlistment. The words hung in the air. Adrian felt his stomach tighten. He had known this was possible, but hearing it stated so directly made it real. However, Commander Reese interjected, the circumstances today were far from normal. Morrison turned to the SEAL commander. Commander, you asked a corpsman with no documented flight experience to pilot a combat mission into hostile territory. That decision put lives at risk. Reese met his superior's gaze without flinching. Sir, I verified Petty Officer Quan's qualifications before we launched. I watched him demonstrate comprehensive knowledge of the aircraft and its systems. I made an informed tactical decision based on available resources and mission requirements. You gambled. I assessed risk and made a command decision. That is what you trained me to do. Reese paused, and it worked. 2 American citizens are alive because of that decision. My entire team returned safely from a mission that had 0 probability of success without a qualified pilot. Morrison shifted his attention to Senior Chief Holland. Senior Chief, your assessment? Holland spoke with measured authority. Sir, I have worked with Petty Officer Quan for 11 months. In that time, I have observed him under various stressful conditions. He has consistently demonstrated sound judgment, technical competence, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. What he did today confirmed what I already suspected. He is exceptional at everything he attempts. The legal officer spoke up. The issue is not competence. It is integrity. If he lied about this, what else might he have lied about? Adrian felt the accusation like a physical blow. But before he could respond, an unexpected voice entered the conversation. He did not lie, Vaughn said from his position standing along the wall. Everyone turned to look at the other corpsman. Vaughn continued, his voice steady. He chose not to disclose information that was not required for his rate. He enlisted as a corpsman and performed as a corpsman. Exceptionally well, I might add. The legal officer frowned. Petty Officer Vaughn, are you defending someone who violated regulations? I'm stating facts, sir. I have worked alongside Petty Officer Quan for the same 11 months as Senior Chief Holland. I have observed him save lives, train junior personnel, and conduct himself with professionalism. Today, he saved the lives of 2 hostages and 8 SEAL operators, including mine, while simultaneously providing medical direction under the worst possible circumstances. Morrison absorbed this unexpected testimony. He looked at his tablet again, scrolling through what appeared to be additional reports. The female journalist is stable, Morrison said. Severe dehydration, grade 2 concussion, 3 cracked ribs from her captivity. The doctors say another 4 hours without medical intervention, and she would have died. He looked at Adrian. The emergency room physician noted that whoever provided pre-hospital care made the difference between life and death. That was Petty Officer Vaughn, sir, Adrian said immediately. He provided all direct patient care during the flight. Under your direction, Vaughn corrected. Your medical commands from the cockpit were what kept her alive. Morrison set down the tablet. Gentlemen, I'm going to step outside with my legal team to discuss this situation. You will remain here. The senior officers filed out, leaving Adrian alone with the SEAL team leadership and Vaughn. The room fell silent. Adrian stared at his hands, still seeing the phantom controls of the helicopter. Maya Torres had been sitting quietly in the corner. She spoke for the first time. Whatever they decide, what you did today mattered. Those journalists have families who will see them again because of you. Adrian appreciated the sentiment, but it did not ease the knot in his chest. I should have disclosed my background from the beginning. All of this could have been avoided. Maybe, Senior Chief Holland said. Or maybe you would have been assigned to an aviation unit and never ended up with our team. Maybe those journalists would be dead right now because the pilot we had available could not make that landing. He stood and walked to the window. I do not believe in fate, document, but I believe things happen for reasons we do not always understand in the moment. Commander Reese checked his watch. Whatever happens, you prove yourself today, not just as a pilot, but as a teammate who makes hard decisions under pressure. That counts for something. 20 minutes passed before Captain Morrison returned. His expression gave nothing away as he resumed his seat. The legal officers flanked him, their faces equally neutral. After consultation with base legal and reviewing the totality of circumstances, Morrison began, I have reached a decision. He paused, letting the tension build. Petty Officer Quan, your failure to disclose relevant qualifications was a serious lapse in judgment. However, your service record is otherwise exemplary, and your actions today were nothing short of extraordinary. Adrian barely breathed. Therefore, you will receive a formal letter of counseling for failure to disclose, which will be placed in your service record. Additionally, you will be required to complete a full flight evaluation and currency check to formally document your qualifications. He paused again. Upon successful completion of that evaluation, you will be reassigned to a billet that utilizes both your medical and aviation skills. The relief hit Adrian like a wave. Not a court-martial, not separation, a counseling letter and reassignment. However, Morrison continued, his tone hardening, if you ever again fail to disclose relevant information or qualifications, the consequences will be severe. Do I make myself clear? Crystal clear, sir. Thank you, sir. Morrison stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Commander Reese, ensure Petty Officer Quan completes the required evaluations within 30 days. He looked at Adrian one final time. You have significant gifts, young man. Do not waste them by hiding them. No, sir. I will not. The officers departed. Adrian sat motionless, processing what had just happened. His career was intact. Damaged, but intact. Vaughn approached and extended his hand again. Congratulations, document. You deserve this. Thank you for what you said in there. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did. Vaughn's expression was earnest. I spent months resenting you because you made me feel inadequate. But today you showed me what real excellence looks like. is not about competing with others. It is about being the best version of yourself for the mission. Adrian shook his hand firmly. You saved that woman's life. That is real excellence. We both did. That is the point. Senior Chief Holland gathered his gear. Team meeting in 1 hour. We have to debrief the mission properly and figure out how to move forward without our medic. I'm not going anywhere for 30 days, sir, Adrian said. Not until I complete the evaluations. Hold on the grind. Good, because we have training operations scheduled, and I do not trust anyone else to keep these lunatics alive. The team filed out, leaving Adrian alone with Maya. She had waited patiently through the entire proceeding, her presence quiet but supportive. How are you really doing? She asked. Adrian considered the question honestly. Exhausted, relieved, scared about what comes next. You know they're going to want you to fly more often now. Once command knows you have this capability, they will use it. I know. How do you feel about that? He thought back to the flight, the weight of the controls, the responsibility for every life aboard. 18 months ago, I would have said I never wanted to fly again. After today, I'm not sure anymore. Maya smiled slightly. Maybe you needed to fly for the right reasons, to remember why you loved it in the first place. Maybe. She stood to leave, then paused. For what it is worth, I think you're going to be an incredible asset in whatever role they put you in. Someone who can heal and fly, who understands both saving lives and getting people home safely. That is rare. After she left, Adrian sat alone in the empty debriefing room. Through the window, he could see the damaged Seahawk being towed to a maintenance hangar. Bullet holes visible in the tail boom, evidence of how close they had come to disaster. But they had not crashed. Everyone had survived. The mission had succeeded. He pulled out his phone and saw a message from an unknown number. It was from a male journalist they had rescued, somehow obtained through base contacts. The message was simple but powerful. Thank you for bringing us home. My daughter gets to see her father again because of you and your team. I will never forget what you did. Adrian read it 3 times. Then he stood, squared his shoulders, and walked out of the room. He had medical equipment to restock, evaluations to prepare for, and a team that would need him again soon. The past was still there, the guilt still present. But Senior Chief Holland had been right. Things happen for reasons. And maybe, just maybe, all of his experiences, both the ones he was proud of and the ones that haunted him, had been leading to this moment. He was not just a medic anymore. He was not just a pilot. He was something new, something the Navy had not quite figured out how to classify yet. But he knew who he was. And for the first time in 18 months, that was enough. 3 days after the mission, Adrian stood in front of a different kind of challenge. The Flight Evaluation Board consisted of 2 senior Navy pilots, a representative from Naval Air Forces, and Commander Reese as an observer. They sat behind a long table in the Aviation Squadron briefing room, folders open, expressions neutral. Chief Warrant Officer Patricia Chun, the senior evaluator, reviewed Adrian's documented flight history. Her reputation as a tough but fair assessor was well known throughout naval aviation. Petty Officer Kwan, she began, your contractor flight records show extensive combat experience. However, you have not flown in an official Navy capacity. This evaluation will determine if your skills meet our standards for tactical aviation operations. Adrian stood at attention. Understood, Mom. We will conduct this evaluation in 3 phases. Written examination covering Navy aviation regulations and procedures. Oral board testing your knowledge of aircraft systems and emergency protocols. Finally, a practical flight evaluation in an MH-60S with a safety pilot. The written exam took 2 hours. Adrian worked through questions on Navy flight regulations, air traffic control procedures, emergency protocols, and tactical aviation doctrine. Some of it was familiar from his contractor days. Much of it was new, specific to naval operations. He finished with 20 minutes to spare and used the time to review his answers. When the exam was scored, Chief Chun announced the results without emotion. 94%. Passing score is 80. You're cleared for the oral board. The oral examination was more challenging. The evaluators fired questions rapidly, testing not just knowledge, but the ability to think under pressure. You are conducting a tactical insertion at night when you lose all electrical power. Walk me through your emergency procedure. Adrian responded immediately. Maintain aircraft control using standby instruments and visual references. Attempt to restore power through emergency generator. If unsuccessful, plan for immediate landing using night vision goggles and terrain features. Declare emergency with available communications. Your patient develops a tension pneumothorax in flight. You're 30 minutes from base. What is your priority? Fly the aircraft safely remains first priority. Direct medical personnel to perform needle decompression while I maintain stable flight conditions. Request priority landing and alert medical facilities for immediate trauma response upon arrival. The questions continued for 90 minutes. Aircraft systems, emergency procedures, medical scenarios, tactical situations. The evaluators probed for weaknesses, testing his ability to integrate pilot and medical responsibilities. Finally, Chief Chen leaned back. The oral examination is complete. Your knowledge base is solid. Tomorrow we fly. That evening, Adrian returned to his quarters to find an unexpected visitor waiting. The female journalist he had helped rescue sat on a bench outside the barracks, her arm in a sling, bruises still visible on her face. She stood when she saw him approach. Petty Officer Quan? Yes, ma'am. My name is Rebecca Martinez. I want to thank you personally. She extended her uninjured hand, and Adrian shook it carefully. The doctors told me what you and your team did. Flying a damaged helicopter for 90 minutes while directing my medical care from the cockpit. That is not something I will ever forget. You're looking much better, ma'am. I am alive. That is better than I had any right to expect 3 days ago. She paused, gathering her words. I am a journalist. I have covered conflicts around the world. I have seen exceptional people do extraordinary things. What you did ranks among the most remarkable acts I have witnessed. I was doing my job, ma'am. No, Rebecca shook her head firmly. Your job was to be a medic. You chose to reveal a hidden skill to save lives. That required courage beyond your duty. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. When you are ready to tell your story, I would be honored to share it. Not for sensationalism, but because people need to know that heroes like you exist. Adrian took the card politely, but made no commitment. Thank you, ma'am. I am glad you are recovering well. After she left, he sat on the bench where she had been waiting. The card bore her name and contact information for a major news network. He pocketed it without further thought. Some stories did not need to be told publicly. The flight evaluation began at 0600 the next morning. Chief Chun would serve as the safety pilot and primary evaluator. They walked around the MH-60S together during the pre-flight inspection, Chun watching as Adrian checked every system. Talk me through what you were looking for, she instructed. Adrian pointed to specific components, checking for fluid leaks, particularly hydraulic and transmission oil, inspecting flight control linkages for proper connection and freedom of movement, verifying rotor blades for damage, proper tracking, and secure attachment, engine intake and exhaust areas for foreign object debris. They completed the walk-around and climbed into the cockpit. Chun took the left seat while Adrian occupied the right, the traditional pilot-in-command position for Navy helicopters. He ran through the pre-start checklist methodically, explaining each step. Battery on, verify voltage within limits. Fuel boost pumps on, check pressure indications. Engine 1 start, monitoring torque and temperature during spool-up. The engines came to life smoothly. Adrian completed the rest of the start sequence, then began the before takeoff checks. Chun watched every movement, occasionally asking questions to verify his understanding. Tower, Navy 7-2, requesting taxi for evaluation flight. Adrian transmitted. The clearance came back immediately. They taxied to the runway, completed final checks, and lifted into a hover. Adrian held the aircraft steady, demonstrating precise control. Depart when ready, Chun said. Adrian transitioned to forward flight, climbing and accelerating smoothly. The helicopter responded to his inputs like an extension of his own body. Muscle memory from 1800 hours took over, making every movement natural. Chun ran him through a series of maneuvers. Steep turns, emergency descents, confined area approaches. Adrian executed each one within Navy standards. Then she escalated the difficulty. Simulated engine failure, she announced, rolling back the throttle on engine 1. Adrian responded instantly, lowering collective, adjusting pedal input to maintain heading, entering auto-rotation. The helicopter descended in controlled flight, rotors windmilling to maintain RPM. At 500 feet, Chun called for recovery. Adrian added power smoothly and arrested the descent. Good. Now I want to see your precision. Chun directed him to a training area with marked landing zones of various sizes. Land in Zone 3. Zone 3 was barely larger than the helicopter itself. Adrian approached carefully, using reference points to judge his position. The landing was smooth, centered perfectly within the marked area. They flew for 2 hours. Chun tested every aspect of his skills, from basic maneuvers to complex tactical scenarios. She simulated emergencies, created challenging situations, pushed him to demonstrate proficiency under pressure. Finally, she directed him back to base. Land on the numbers, she said, indicating the precise touchdown point at the runway threshold. Adrian executed the approach perfectly, setting the helicopter down exactly on the designated spot. He completed the shutdown checklist and sat back, exhausted but satisfied. Chun made notes on her evaluation form. Then she looked at him directly. That was some of the finest flying I have seen from someone who is not wearing wings. Your contractor training was clearly exceptional. Thank you, ma'am. However, she continued, you have a tendency to be overly cautious on your approaches. In combat, you may need to be more aggressive. That is something we can work on with additional training. Understood, Mom. They returned to the briefing room where the other evaluators waited. Chief Chun presented her findings, reviewing each portion of the evaluation. When she finished, the board members consulted briefly. The Naval Air Force's representative spoke. Petty Officer Kwan, based on your performance across all 3 phases of evaluation, this board finds you qualified for Navy tactical helicopter operations. You are hereby designated as a Navy tactical aircrewman with pilot qualifications, pending completion of a formal flight training pipeline. Adrian felt relief wash over him. The designation was not full pilot status, but it was official recognition of his capabilities. Commander Reese stood from his observer position. I have a question for the board. Given Petty Officer Kwan's unique combination of medical and aviation skills, what billets would be appropriate for someone with his qualifications? The evaluators exchanged glances. Chief Chun answered, honestly, Commander, there is not a standard billet for this combination. He is qualified as a corpsman and now recognized as having pilot-level aviation skills. We would need to create something specific. Could he be assigned to continue serving with SEAL teams while maintaining aviation currency? Chun considered this. It is unconventional, but given the nature of special operations and the value of having someone who can both fly and provide medical care, I see no regulation preventing it. He would need regular flight hours to maintain proficiency. Reese smiled slightly. I can guarantee he will get those hours, Chief. My team conducts regular helicopter operations. The board chair nodded. Then we will recommend assignment to continue with SEAL Team 7 in a dual-role capacity. Medical support with aviation augmentation. After the board adjourned, Reese pulled Adrian aside. You know what this means, right? Sir, you are not leaving the team. You are staying with us, but now when we fly, you might be in the cockpit instead of the cabin. Adrian processed this. The reassignment he had expected was not happening. He would remain with the SEALs, the team that had become his family over 11 months. How do you feel about that? Reese asked. Honestly, sir, I cannot think of anywhere I would rather be. Good, because we have a training operation next week, and I want you flying. Time to get current. That evening, the team gathered at a local bar that catered to Navy personnel. It was an unofficial celebration, though no one said exactly what they were celebrating. Senior Chief Holland raised his beer. To Doc Kwan, the quietest man on the team until we needed him to speak up. And when he did, he changed everything. The team raised their glasses. Adrian felt the weight of their acceptance, their trust. These men had gone to war with him. They had bet their lives on his skills. That bond meant more than any official evaluation. Vaughn approached with 2 fresh beers, handing one to Adrian. I want you to know something. When I first joined this team, I thought being the best meant never showing weakness, never admitting mistakes, always being right. You taught me that being the best means doing whatever the mission requires, even when it scares you. We both learned something, Adrian replied. You taught me that excellence in one area does not mean abandoning excellence in another. I can be both a medic and a pilot. I do not have to choose. Maya Torres joined them. So what happens now? You are officially the team's resident miracle worker? Now I train, Adrian said. I get current on Navy procedures. I practice both skill sets until I can move between them seamlessly. And when we need you to fly, you fly. When we need medical, you heal. Maya clinked her beer against his. Sounds like you've found your calling. Adrian looked around at his team. These people who had accepted him, challenged him, and ultimately helped him accept himself. Maybe calling was too strong a word, but purpose? That fit perfectly. Senior Chief Holland appeared beside him. Tomorrow we start cross-training. You teach some of the team basic medical skills. They teach you combat tactics you missed. We make everyone more capable. Sounds good, Senior Chief. And Doc, Holland's expression grew serious. What you did last week was not luck. It was not chance. It was the culmination of every experience you have ever had, good and bad, coming together at the exact moment we needed it. That is not just skill. That is who you are. The celebration continued into the evening. Stories were told, bonds were strengthened, and Adrian felt himself becoming something he had not been in 18 months. Not the silent medic hiding from his past. Not the contractor pilot running from guilt. But something whole. Someone who had integrated every part of himself into a new identity. The past still hurt. The memories still haunted him, but they no longer defined him. He had flown in a fire and brought everyone home. He had made impossible choices and lived with the consequences. He had revealed his truth and been accepted. That was enough. That was everything. 2 weeks later, Adrian found himself back in a cockpit, this time with Chief Warrant Officer Ryan Blake in the co-pilot seat. Blake's leg was still in a brace, but he had insisted on returning to limited duty, starting with instructional flights. Your pre-flight was textbook, Blake said as Adrian completed the final checks. But I want to see how you handle yourself when things get complicated. Today we're doing tactical maneuvers, low-level navigation, and simulated combat scenarios. Understood, Chief. They lifted off from Coronado and headed north along the coast. Blake directed Adrian through a series of increasingly complex exercises. Naphtha flying, using terrain to mask their profile. Quick stops and tactical turns. Emergency procedures executed at low altitude where mistakes had immediate consequences. Adrian's skills were sharp, honed by recent experience and constant practice. But Blake pushed harder, creating scenarios that tested the limits of his abilities. Engine fire, left side, Blake called out suddenly. Adrian's hands moved through the emergency procedure without hesitation. Throttle back on affected engine. Fire suppression activated. Auto-rotation entry if required. He maintained control smoothly, demonstrating the muscle memory of extensive training. Good. Blake made notes on his kneeboard. Now let me show you something Navy-specific that your contractor training probably did not cover. They spent the next hour working through carrier approach procedures, shipboard landing techniques, and naval tactical communications. Blake was a patient instructor, explaining the nuances that separated Navy aviation from civilian contract work. When they returned to base, Blake's assessment was direct. You're a natural pilot. Document. Better than most I have trained. But you still think like a contractor. You make excellent individual decisions, but you need to integrate better with the larger tactical picture. How do I do that, Chief? Blake gestured toward the SEAL team compound. You embed yourself more deeply with the team. Understand their tactics, their thinking, their needs. A pilot who knows what the ground team will do before they do it is worth 3 pilots who just follow instructions. That evening, Adrian attended his first full tactical planning session as both medic and potential pilot. The team was preparing for a training operation that would simulate a hostage rescue similar to the Mexico mission. Commander Reese laid out the scenario. We have intelligence indicating multiple hostages in a compound. Unknown number of hostiles. Daylight insertion required due to civilian presence. High risk of casualties. He looked directly at Adrian. Doc, I want you flying this one. It will give us a chance to practice with you in the cockpit instead of the cabin. But that means we need a different medical plan. Vaughn spoke up immediately. I will take primary medical responsibility. Doc can provide oversight from the cockpit and take over if we need his skills post-extraction. Reese nodded approval. Maya, you will co-pilot with Document Senior Chief. I want you coordinating between air and ground elements. The planning session lasted 3 hours. Adrian absorbed everything, asking questions about team tactics, decision points, and contingencies. He was learning to think like them, to anticipate their needs before they were voiced. Senior Chief Holland pulled him aside as the meeting concluded. You're doing good work, Document, but I want you to remember something. When you're in that cockpit, you are not just a pilot. You are not just a medic. You're a team member who happens to have those skills. The moment you forget that and start thinking of yourself as separate from the team, you lose what makes you special. I understand, Senior Chief. Do you? Because I have seen plenty of pilots who think their job is just to provide a taxi service. And I have seen medics who think their job is just to patch people up. You have the chance to be something different. Someone who understands the entire mission from multiple perspectives. Do not waste that. The training operation launched 3 days later. Adrian sat in the pilot seat of a borrowed MH-60S, Maya beside him, the SEAL team loaded in the cabin. The scenario was designed to be challenging, incorporating multiple variables and unexpected complications. They flew to the training area, a mock compound constructed to replicate real-world conditions. Adrian executed the insertion perfectly, setting down in the designated landing zone with minimal dust signature. Ground team away, Maya reported. Adrian lifted off and moved to a holding pattern 300 meters away, maintaining visual contact with the compound. From this vantage point, he could see the SEALs moving through their assault, breaching doors, clearing rooms. Then the scenario shifted. Role players simulating hostiles engaged the team with simulated fire. One SEAL went down, his trainer vest indicating a serious hit. Man down, Reese transmitted. Actual casualty simulation. We need immediate medical evacuation. Adrian did not hesitate, bringing the bird back in. Maya prepped for hot pickup. He dove toward the landing zone, using terrain masking to minimize exposure. The approach was aggressive, faster than standard procedures dictated. But the scenario demanded speed. They touched down, and the injured SEAL was loaded immediately. As soon as the skids were on the ground, Adrian was out of his seat, moving to the casualty in the cabin. What do we have? He asked Vaughn, who had been first to the patient. Simulated gunshot wound to the abdomen. Vaughn's hands were already applying pressure. Significant bleeding, probable internal injuries. Adrian took over, his medical training overriding his pilot responsibilities. Maya kept the helicopter at flight idle, ready to lift off on his command. Adrian worked the scenario, calling for interventions, directing treatment, preparing the casualty for transport. He is stable enough to move, Adrian announced. Maya, get us to the trauma center. She looked at him uncertainly. I can get us airborne, but I am not qualified to fly this back to base. Adrian was torn between 2 roles. The patient needed continued care, but the helicopter needed a qualified pilot for the 20-minute flight back to base. Senior Chief Holland appeared at the cabin door. Doc, what do you need? I need to treat this patient, but we need someone flying. Then treat the patient. Holland moved to the cockpit. I have enough stick time to keep us straight and level. Maya can handle the radios and help me with the complicated stuff. Adrian nodded and returned his focus to the casualty. Holland settled into the pilot's seat, his movements careful but confident. Maya coached him through the takeoff, and Adrian heard the helicopter lift smoothly. The flight back was tense. Adrian worked on the simulated patient while listening to Holland and Maya coordinate the flight. The senior chief was not a pilot, but his years of experience in helicopters gave him enough familiarity to manage basic flight. They landed safely at the training medical facility. The scenario ended with the casualty successfully evacuated and treated. The team gathered for the after-action review. Commander Reese addressed the group. That was not the plan. The plan was Doc flying and Vaughn handling medical. But the scenario demanded we adapt. He looked at Adrian. You made a choice to prioritize medical care over flight responsibilities. Walk me through that decision. Sir, the patient was critical and needed immediate intervention. Senior Chief Holland had sufficient capability to fly the aircraft back safely with Maya's assistance. The greater risk was losing the patient, not the flight. Reese nodded. Correct assessment, but it highlights something we need to address. Your dual capabilities create tactical flexibility, but also create decision points where you have to choose. We need a plan for that. Maya spoke up. Commander, what if we cross-train more team members in basic flight skills? Not to make them pilots, but to give them enough capability to handle simple flying in emergencies. That way, if Doc has to leave the cockpit, we have options. Reese considered this. That is actually a solid idea. Doc, could you develop a training program? Yes, sir. Basic controls, emergency procedures, enough to keep the aircraft stable and get it safely to a landing zone. Senior Chief Holland grinned. I am too old to become a pilot, but I would not mind learning enough to be useful. The discussion continued, the team working through the implications of Adrian's unique position. It was clear that having someone with both skill sets created opportunities, but also challenges that required creative solutions. After the review, Blake approached Adrian. I was observing the whole exercise. Your medical work was exceptional. Your decision to leave the cockpit was correct. But here's what impressed me most. You trusted your teammates to handle the flying. That shows real team integration. I had good people in that cockpit, Adrian replied. You also had confidence they could do what needed to be done. That is not something that can be taught. Blake paused. I have been flying for 18 years, document. I have worked with a lot of crews. What you are building with this team is special. Do not take it for granted. That evening, Adrian sat in the SEAL team briefing room, working on the cross-training curriculum Blake had suggested. The basic flight familiarization course would give team members enough knowledge to assist in emergencies without making them qualified pilots. Vaughn entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Adrian and sat down. Thought you could use this. You have been working for 6 hours straight. Thanks. Adrian accepted the coffee gratefully. Vaughn looked at the curriculum materials spread across the table. You know what is interesting? 6 months ago, I would have said this was impossible. That you could not be both an excellent medic and an excellent pilot. That trying to do both would make you mediocre at everything. And now I think maybe excellence is not about being the best at one thing. Maybe it is about integrating multiple capabilities so well that they amplify each other. You are a better pilot because you understand medical needs. You are a better medic because you understand tactical aviation. The combination makes you more valuable than the sum of the parts. Adrian considered this insight. You have changed a lot in 2 weeks. So have you. Vaughn took a sip of his coffee. Actually, that is not true. You have not changed. You have just stopped hiding who you really are. And watching that process has forced me to reconsider a lot of my own assumptions. Maya entered the room, followed by Senior Chief Holland. They both looked tired but energized. Team meeting tomorrow at 0800, Holland announced. Commander wants to discuss integrating Doc's flight capability into our standard operating procedures. This might become permanent. Adrian felt the weight of that possibility. A permanent role that utilized everything he had learned, everything he had become. Not running from his past. Not hiding his capabilities. Just serving in a way that made the most sense. Maya smiled at him. How does it feel, knowing you might be creating an entirely new position in naval special warfare? Terrifying, Adrian admitted. And exactly right. Holland clapped him on the shoulder. Get some rest, Document tomorrow, we start building something new. And you were at the center of it. After they left, Adrian sat alone with his curriculum materials and his thoughts. 2 weeks ago, he had stood up in a room full of SEALs and revealed a truth he had hidden for 18 months. That moment had set in motion a cascade of changes that were still unfolding. He was not the quiet medic anymore. He was not the contractor pilot trying to forget. He was something unprecedented. Someone the Navy was still figuring out how to classify. But his team knew exactly who he was. And that was all that mattered. The briefing that would change everything came 4 weeks after the Mexico mission. Admiral Garrett, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, arrived at Coronado unannounced. His presence meant something significant was happening. The entire SEAL Team 7 assembled in the main briefing room. Adrian stood along the wall in his usual position, now wearing flight wings alongside his medical insignia. The combination drew occasional curious looks from personnel who had not yet heard his story. Admiral Garrett wasted no time on pleasantries. "Gentlemen, and Petty Officer Torres, I am here to discuss an operational concept that has gained considerable attention at the command level." He activated the presentation screen. The concept of integrated medical aviation support for special operations teams. Adrian felt every eye in the room shift toward him. The Admiral continued. "For weeks ago, SEAL Team 7 conducted a high-risk extraction using a corpsman with undisclosed flight qualifications. That mission succeeded where conventional approaches would have failed. The concept has sparked interest across the special operations community." Commander Reese stood. "Sir, Petty Officer Kwan has proven himself invaluable in his dual role. We have been developing protocols to integrate his capabilities into our standard operations." "I am aware, Commander." Garrett pulled up a detailed report. "I have reviewed your after-action reports, training evaluations, and operational concepts. The data is compelling." He paused for effect, "which is why I am here to formalize this capability." The room went silent. "Effective immediately, we are establishing a pilot program," Garrett announced with a slight smile at his own pun. "The Naval Special Warfare Medical Aviation Integration Program. Petty Officer Kwan will be the inaugural member." Adrian felt his heart rate accelerate. A formal program meant this was not just a temporary arrangement. This was becoming real. "The program will have 3 phases, Garrett explained. Phase 1, Petty Officer Kwan continues with Team 7 while we develop doctrine and procedures. Phase 2, we identify and train additional personnel with similar dual capabilities. Phase 3, full integration across naval special warfare units." He looked directly at Adrian. "Petty Officer Kwan, this puts you in a unique position. You will be writing the manual that others will follow. The decisions you make, the protocols you develop, will shape how we employ this capability for years to come. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" Adrian stepped forward. "Yes, sir. I am ready." "Good, because the easy part is over. Now comes the hard work." After the Admiral departed, the team gathered around Adrian. The congratulations were genuine, but Adrian could see the questions forming in their minds. What did this mean for the team? Would he be pulled away for the new program? Commander Reese addressed the concern directly. "Doc stays with us through Phase 1. That is non-negotiable. We're the proof of concept. We make this work, or we prove it cannot work." Senior Chief Holland added his perspective. "What this means is we stop being just a SEAL team with a medic who can fly. We become the template for a new operational capability. Every decision we make gets scrutinized. Every mission becomes a case study." "No pressure then," Maya said with a grin. The following weeks were intense. Adrian found himself balancing multiple responsibilities, regular medical duties with the team, continuous flight training to maintain proficiency, documentation of procedures and protocols, briefings with senior officers who wanted to understand the concept. Chief Blake became his primary mentor for the aviation side, working with him to develop standards that balance capability with safety. They spent hours in classrooms and cockpits, refining techniques and documenting best practices. "The key is knowing when to be a pilot and when to be a medic," Blake explained during one session. "In most cases, you can plan ahead. But when you cannot plan, You need decision rules that are clear and repeatable. Adrian pulled out his notes. I have been working on a decision matrix. If the immediate threat is to aircraft safety, pilot role takes priority. If the immediate threat is to life and the aircraft can be managed by others, medical role takes priority. Blake studied the matrix carefully. That is solid, but add one more factor: team capability. If you have someone on the team who can handle either role adequately, you default to whichever role requires your specific expertise most. The medical side was equally complex. Vaughn became an unexpected partner in developing medical protocols for dual-role operations. Their relationship had transformed from antagonism to mutual respect to genuine collaboration. One evening, working late in the medical facility, Vaughn raised a question that had been bothering him. Doc, what happens when this program expands? When they find other people with your skills and start assigning them to different teams? Adrian looked up from his documentation. What do you mean? I mean you and I have learned to work together. We have built trust. When you're flying, I know exactly what you need from me medically. When you're treating patients, I know how to support you. That does not happen overnight. How do we replicate that with new people? It was a good question. Adrian thought for a moment before answering. We build it into the training. We create standards for communication, coordination, role transitions. We make the system robust enough that it does not depend on personal relationships. Vaughn nodded slowly. That makes sense, but do not forget the human element. The best protocols in the world do not replace trust. 6 weeks after the Admiral's visit, the team was activated for a real-world mission. Intelligence had located a high-value target in Syria. The mission required helicopter insertion, target capture, and immediate extraction. Timeline was critical. Adrian sat in the mission briefing, processing the information from both pilot and medical perspectives. The insertion zone was hot. The target was likely protected by armed security. Casualties were probable. Commander Reese outlined the plan, then looked at Adrian. Doc, I want you flying this one. The insertion requires precision that I trust you to deliver. Vaughn will handle medical in the cabin. Maya co-pilots. Adrian studied the mission map. The landing zone was in an urban area, surrounded by buildings. Rotor clearance would be minimal. Intelligence suggested hostile forces nearby. This was not a training exercise. What are the contingencies if we take casualties during the insertion? Adrian asked. Reese pointed to alternate landing zones. We have backup positions here and here, but the primary plan is fast in, fast out. Minimize time on target. The mission launched at 0100. Adrian sat in the pilot's seat, running through pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. Real lives, real bullets, real consequences. They flew through the night, crossing into hostile airspace with all non-essential systems dark. Adrian navigated using night vision goggles and terrain-following radar, staying low to avoid detection. Target area in 5 minutes, Maya reported quietly. Adrian could see the city ahead, a cluster of lights in the darkness. Somewhere in that urban sprawl was their objective. He reviewed the approach path one more time, committing every detail to memory. 2 minutes. The city was closer now, buildings rising to meet them. Adrian began his descent, using the structures themselves as cover. The helicopter slipped between buildings, rotors dangerously close to walls and rooftops. This was flying at the edge of capability, where mistakes measured in feet meant death. 1 minute. He could see the landing zone now, a small courtyard barely large enough for the aircraft. 30 seconds. The approach was perfect, every input precise. Every correction immediate. They dropped into the courtyard, skids touching down with barely a sound. The seals poured out, moving toward the target building with practiced efficiency. Adrian kept the engines at flight idle, scanning for threats. Beside him, Maya monitored communications and provided security. In the cabin, Vaughn was ready with medical equipment. The operation proceeded flawlessly. The team secured the target and was moving back to the helicopter within 4 minutes. No casualties. No complications. Then gunfire erupted from a neighboring building. Taking fire, Reese transmitted. Get ready to go hot. Adrian's hands tensed on the controls. The team was still loading, moving as fast as possible while under fire. Rounds impacted the buildings around them, concrete chips flying. One SEAL stumbled. Hit! Another operator grabbed him, dragging him toward the helicopter. "We have a casualty," Reese called out. "Get him loaded now." The wounded SEAL was hauled into the cabin. Vaughn immediately went to work, assessing the injury. Adrian wanted to help, but he was locked in the pilot's seat, waiting for the command to lift off. "Everyone in," Reese shouted. Adrian pulled collective, and the helicopter leaped into the air. Rounds chased them upward, some finding the fuselage. But they were climbing, accelerating, pulling away from the kill zone. "How bad is the casualty?" Adrian called back to Vaughn. "Gunshot to the leg, femur. Bleeding is controlled. He is stable." Relief flooded through Adrian. Stable meant treatable. They could get him home. The flight back was tense, but uneventful. Adrian focused on flying while listening to Vaughn's calm reports on the patient condition. The coordination they had practiced was working perfectly. They crossed back into friendly airspace and made directly for the field hospital. The landing was smooth, medical personnel ready and waiting. As the casualty was transferred to trauma care, Adrian completed his shutdown checklist. His hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline finally catching up with him. Commander Reese appeared at the cockpit. "Outstanding work, document." The insertion was perfect. The extraction was exactly what we needed. The casualty? Go to be fine. Vaughn's quick action saved his leg, maybe his life. But we only got him a Vaughn because you got us in and out cleanly. Senior Chief Holland climbed up to the cockpit. "That was some of the best combat flying I have ever seen. You threaded that bird through buildings like you were born to it." Adrian managed a tired smile. "Just doing my job, Senior Chief." "Your job is now officially the impossible," Holland replied. "And you make it look easy." Back at base, the team gathered for the debrief. The mission was classified as a complete success. Target captured, minimal casualties, extraction executed flawlessly. Admiral Garrett attended the debrief via video conference. His assessment was direct. "This mission demonstrates the viability of the Medical Aviation Integration Program." Petty Officer Kwan performed dual roles at the highest level under actual combat conditions. "We are moving forward with Phase 2. Adrian felt the weight of what that meant. This was no longer experimental. This was proven, and he had proven it. After the debrief, Vaughn approached him privately. "You know what just happened, right?" Adrian looked at him questioningly. "You just validated every decision that brought you to this point. Every choice you made, every skill you developed, every truth you finally revealed. It all came together in that mission." Vaughn extended his hand. "I am proud to serve with you." Adrian shook his hand firmly. "The feeling is mutual." That night, lying in his rack, Adrian reflected on the journey from quiet medic to combat pilot to something entirely new. The path had not been straight. The choices had not been easy. But every step had led him exactly where he needed to be. He was not hiding anymore. He was not running from his past. He was building a future that integrated everything he had learned, everything he had become. And tomorrow, he would do it again. 3 months after the Syria mission, Adrian stood in front of a classroom full of students. But these were not ordinary students. They were carefully selected personnel from across the military, each possessing both medical and aviation backgrounds. They were the second class of the Medical Aviation Integration Program. The first class, which had graduated 2 weeks earlier, consisted of 3 individuals who were now embedded with different special operations units. Adrian had personally trained them, passing on everything he had learned through trial, error, and combat experience. Today's lesson focused on decision-making under pressure. Adrian had 12 case studies prepared, each based on real scenarios he or his classmates had encountered. Scenario 3, he began. You are piloting an extraction with a critical patient in the cabin. Your co-pilot is injured and cannot assist. You lose hydraulic pressure in the primary system. The patient codes. What is your priority? A hand went up. Air Force Pararescue Specialist Technical Sergeant Lisa Park. Stabilize the aircraft first using emergency hydraulic system. Then provide verbal medical direction to whoever is treating the patient. Good start. Adrian clicked to the next slide. But what if there is no one else qualified to treat the patient? You're the only medical provider aboard. The room fell silent as students worked through the impossible calculus. Park spoke again, more hesitantly. In that case, I would have to prioritize the aircraft, because if it crashes, everyone dies, including the patient. Correct. Adrian moved to the front of the classroom. This is the hardest lesson you will learn. Sometimes being the most qualified person in two critical roles means accepting you cannot do both simultaneously. Your job is to make the choice that saves the most lives. A Navy corpsman in the back raised his hand. How do you live with making that choice? How do you accept that someone died because you were flying instead of treating them? Adrian met his eyes directly. You carry it. You learn from it. And you work to build teams and systems that minimize those situations. But when they happen, you make the best decision you can with the information available, and you live with the consequences. That is command responsibility. The classroom session ran for 4 hours. Adrian covered tactical aviation, combat medicine, crisis decision-making, and team integration. Between each section, students shared their own experiences and challenges. After class, Chief Blake appeared at the door. He had been observing from the back. You're a natural instructor. Document. These students respect you because you have done what you're asking them to do. I just tell them the truth, Chief. This job is harder than it looks, and the mistakes are more costly than they can imagine. That is why they need to hear it from you. Blake handed him a folder. Speaking of which, you have new orders. Adrian opened the folder and scanned the contents. Temporary assignment to Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Duration 6 months. Purpose: develop advanced integration protocols and train Tier 1 operators. DevGru, Adrian said quietly. SEAL Team 6. They want the best learning from the best. Blake smiled. Congratulations, document. You're moving up. What about Team 7? You will return after the rotation. This is about spreading the knowledge, making the capability resilient across the force. That evening, Adrian met with his team one last time before the transfer. They gathered at their usual spot, the Barnier base that had become their unofficial team room. Commander Reese raised his beer. To Daquan, you came to us as the quiet guy in the corner. You are leaving as the man who changed how Naval Special Warfare thinks about integrated operations. He paused, but you will always be Team 7. The team echoed the sentiment. Glasses clinked. Stories were shared. The bond that had formed over months of training and combat was evident in every interaction. Senior Chief Holland pulled Adrian aside during the celebration. I want you to know something, he said quietly. When you first showed up, I saw potential. I saw someone who was running from something, but had the core of greatness. I never imagined you would become this. Become what, Senior Chief? Someone who does not just serve in 2 roles, but who has redefined what service means. You have shown an entire generation of operators that excellence is not about specialization. It is about integration. Maya Torres joined them, carrying fresh beers for both. DevGru is lucky to get you. But do not forget where you proved yourself first. Never, Adrian replied. This team gave me the chance to be who I really am. I will not forget that. Vaughn was the last to approach. Their relationship had traveled the furthest distance, from antagonism to respect to genuine friendship. We started off wrong, Vaughn said. I let my insecurity turn into hostility. But you never responded with hostility back. You just kept being excellent until I had no choice but to see the truth. You pushed me to be better, Adrian replied. Even when it did not feel like it at the time, you challenged me to prove myself. They shook hands, and Vaughn pulled him into a brief embrace. Do not become a stranger. Team 7 will always be your home. The transfer to DevGru happened quickly. Adrian found himself at Dam Neck, Virginia, working with some of the most elite operators in the world. The standards were higher, the expectations more demanding, the missions more sensitive. But the principles remained the same. Fly with precision. Heal with expertise. Integrate both capabilities to create options that did not previously exist. His primary contact was Master Chief Daniel Ross. a veteran of countless classified operations. Ross was direct, skeptical, and demanded perfection. He reminded Adrian of Senior Chief Holland, if Holland had been even more intense. "Your reputation precedes you," Ross said during their first meeting. The primary pilot was sick. The backup pilot was on another operation. Adrian was the only available option. Master Chief Ross laid out the mission parameters. Exfiltration of a friendly asset from hostile territory. Window of opportunity was 3 hours. Insertion zone was urban, hot, and unpredictable. "Can you handle this?" Ross asked bluntly. Adrian assessed the mission profile. The flight would require expert navigation, precision landing, and the ability to adapt to changing conditions. "Yes, Master Chief. I can handle it." The mission launched under darkness. Adrian flew with a DevGru operator named Lieutenant Briggs as his co-pilot. The man was experienced but not a qualified pilot. He could assist but not take over. They crossed into hostile airspace at low altitude, using terrain masking and electronic countermeasures to avoid detection. Adrian's focus was absolute. Every decision mattered. Every input had to be perfect. The insertion zone appeared ahead, a small rooftop in a dense urban area. Intelligence indicated the asset would be waiting with one companion, both needing immediate extraction. Adrian brought the helicopter down onto the rooftop with millimeter precision. The skids touched, and the asset sprinted from cover with his companion. They dove into the cabin, and Adrian was already lifting off before they had fully boarded. Then he saw the problem. The companion was injured, bleeding heavily from a gunshot wound to the chest. This was not in the mission brief. "We have a critical casualty," Briggs reported. Sucking chest wound. Adrian's mind split into dual tracks. He was flying through hostile airspace with minimal margin for error. But a sucking chest wound was immediately life-threatening. Without intervention, the patient would die before they reached safety. "Briggs, you have the controls," Adrian said. The lieutenant looked at him in shock. "I'm not qualified to fly this bird. You can maintain straight and level flight. I need 3 minutes to stabilize this patient." Adrian released the controls and moved to the cabin. The casualty was deteriorating rapidly. Adrian worked with focused efficiency, sealing the chest wound, establishing an airway, starting 4 fluids. His hands moved through procedures he had performed hundreds of times. 2 minutes later, the patient was stabilized. Adrian returned to the cockpit and took the controls back from a visibly relieved Briggs. "How do we do?" "Maintained altitude and heading. No problems." Briggs exhaled slowly. "But I never want to do that again." They crossed back into friendly territory without incident. The casualty was transferred to emergency care and survived. The asset was debriefed. The mission was classified as a complete success. Master Chief Ross met Adrian on the flight line. "That was some of the most impressive flying and medical work I have seen in one mission. You just earned the respect of every operator in this unit." "Just doing what you trained me to do, Master Chief." "No," Ross shook his head. "We did not train you to do that. You brought that capability with you. We just gave you the opportunity to prove it at the highest level." Over the following months, Adrian became an integral part of DevGru operations. He flew missions that would never be acknowledged publicly. He saved lives that would never appear in official records. He proved that the medical aviation integration program could succeed even at Tier 1 level. When his 6-month rotation ended, both DevGru and Team 7 requested his permanent assignment. The decision went to Admiral Garrett. The Admiral's solution was elegant. Adrian would split time between units, serving as a bridge between conventional naval special warfare and Tier 1 operations. He would continue developing doctrine, training new personnel, and proving what integrated capabilities could accomplish. On his last day at Dam Neck, before rotating back to Coronado, Master Chief Ross pulled him aside. "You know what you have become, right? Sir, you're the proof of concept that changed everything. Before you, medical and aviation were separate lanes. You smashed those lanes together and showed us something better was possible." Ross extended his hand. "That is a legacy. Document, make sure you live up to it." The flight back to California gave Adrian time to reflect. 2 years ago, he had been a contractor pilot running from guilt, hiding from his past, trying to reinvent himself as someone else. Now, he was a recognized expert in a field that had not existed before he created it. The guilt was still there. The memory of civilian casualties in Afghanistan still haunted him, but it no longer defined him. He had taken that pain and transformed it into purpose. He had flown again, but this time to save lives instead of enable their loss. As the California coast appeared through the cockpit window, Adrian thought about the question Commander Reese had asked him months ago. Who can fly? He had stood up when no one else could. And in that moment of revelation, he had found redemption. The aircraft descended toward Coronado. Below, he could see the SEAL team compound, the medical facility, the flight line. Home. His team was waiting. His work was continuing. His purpose was clear. Adrian Kwan was no longer the quiet medic hiding in a corner. He was a leader, an innovator, a bridge between capabilities. He was exactly who he needed to be. And tomorrow, the work would continue. 1 year after standing up in that briefing room, Adrian sat in the same seat where it had all begun. The room was packed again, but this time the audience was different. Senior officers from across Naval Special Warfare, representatives from other service branches, personnel who had completed or were enrolled in the Medical Aviation Integration Program. Admiral Garrett stood at the front. Today we are here to recognize the extraordinary success of a program that began with one individual's courage to reveal hidden capabilities. The Medical Aviation Integration Program has now trained 47 personnel across all branches of special operations. The concept has been adopted by Army Special Forces, Air Force Special Tactics, and Marine Raiders. He gestured to Adrian, but it started here with one quiet corpsman who stood up when asked an impossible question. The room erupted in applause. Adrian felt his face flush. He was not comfortable with public recognition. He never had been, but he understood this moment was bigger than personal discomfort. This was about validating a concept that had saved lives. Garrett continued after the applause died down. Petty Officer First Class Kwan, please come forward. Adrian walked to the front of the room. He had been promoted 3 months earlier, a recognition of his expanded responsibilities. The rank felt strange sometimes. He still thought of himself as the junior corpsman who had arrived at Team 18 months ago. The Admiral held a small box. For exceptional performance in combat operations, development of innovative tactical concepts, and dedicated service to Naval Special Warfare, you're hereby awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Combat Distinguishing Device. He pinned the medal to Adrian's uniform. The weight was minimal, but the meaning was profound. Adrian had received awards before as a contractor, but those had felt hollow. This one felt earned through transformation, through facing his past and building something better. After the ceremony, the crowd dispersed into smaller groups. Adrian found himself surrounded by students from the program, all with questions about techniques, decisions, and experiences. Maya Torres rescued him after 20 minutes. Come on, she said with a grin. Your team is waiting outside and they're getting impatient. Team 7 was assembled on the compound grounds. They had evolved too over the past year. New members had joined. Some veterans had rotated to other assignments. But the core remained, and they had saved a spot for Adrian in their formation. Commander Reese addressed the group. We have a tradition in the teams. When someone does something that changes how we operate, we give them a call sign. Something that captures who they are and what they have contributed. He looked at Adrian directly. Doc, from this day forward, your call sign is Bridge. Because you built a bridge between capabilities we thought were separate. You connected medical and aviation. You showed us that integration makes us stronger. The team voiced their approval. Adrian felt emotion tighten his throat. A call sign was more than a nickname. It was acceptance, identity, belonging. Senior Chief Holland stepped forward holding a flight helmet. Painted on the side were the words Bridge Doc with stylized wings wrapped around a medical caduceus. We had this made for you. Wear it and remember that you will always be one of us. Adrian accepted the helmet, running his fingers over the custom artwork. Thank you, Senior Chief. Thank you all. Vaughn approached with his characteristic directness. You know what the best part of this whole story is? What is that? A year ago, I thought you were weak because you stayed quiet. Now I understand that silence was strength. You were not hiding from weakness. You were waiting for the moment when your capabilities would matter most. Vaughn smiled. That is the kind of patience and discipline I am still trying to learn. You have come a long way yourself, Adrian replied. The medical training program you developed is being used across the community now. We all grew. That is what good teams do. The celebration moved to the team room, where food had been laid out. Stories were shared, both old and new. Adrian found himself recounting the Mexico mission for students who wanted to hear it directly from the source. As he described the moment of decision, standing up in front of the team to reveal his flight experience, a young Air Force pararescue trainee asked the question Adrian had been waiting for. Were you scared? When you stood up, knowing everything would change. Adrian thought back to that moment. The weight of the secret, the fear of judgment, the uncertainty of what would happen next. Terrified, he admitted, I had spent 18 months building a life where I did not have to face my past. Standing up meant tearing down all those walls and exposing everything I'd been running from. But you did it anyway, because two people needed help and I had the skills to provide it. In that moment, my fear mattered less than their lives. Adrian paused. That is the lesson I hope you take from this program. Your capabilities are not about you. They are about the people you serve. The young airman nodded thoughtfully and moved away. Maya appeared at Adrian's side. You're good at this teaching thing. Have you considered making it your primary focus? I have thought about it, but I cannot imagine giving up operational flying. Being in the cockpit, working with teams, that is where I feel most useful. Then do both. Maya shrugged. You have already proven you can integrate two seemingly incompatible roles. What is adding instructor to the mix? Later that evening, after the celebrations wound down, Adrian walked to the flight line alone. A new MH-60S sat on the tarmac, assigned to the Medical Aviation Integration Program. It bore special markings identifying it as a dual-role aircraft, equipped for both tactical flight and advanced medical response. He climbed into the cockpit and sat in the familiar seat. His hands found the controls naturally. This was home now. Not hiding, not running, just serving in a way that made the most sense. His phone buzzed. A message from Rebecca Martinez, the journalist he had rescued. She had kept her promise to not sensationalize his story, but she had written a thoughtful piece about the evolution of special operations medicine. The article had won awards and brought attention to the program without compromising operational security. The message was simple. Just saw the ceremony photos. Congratulations on the medal and everything you have built. My daughter asks about you sometimes. She calls you the quiet hero who saved her mom. Thought you should know. Adrian smiled and pocketed the phone. Quiet hero. He supposed that was better than quiet medic. But what mattered was not the label. It was the work. Chief Blake appeared from the hangar. Saw you walk out here. Figured you might want some company. Just saying good night to the bird, Adrian replied. Blake climbed up and settled into the co-pilot's seat. You know what I have learned watching you this past year? What is that, Chief? That the best operators are not the ones who are fearless. They're the ones who are afraid, but do what needs to be done anyway. You were scared to reveal your past. Scared to fly again. Scared to face the guilt you carried. But you did it all because it was right. I'm still scared sometimes. Good. That means you still understand the stakes. Blake looked out at the darkening sky. I am retiring next month. 22 years of flying. And I can honestly say that training you has been the most rewarding experience of my career. You took everything I taught you and made it better. I cannot have done any of this without you, Chief. You have found a way. That is who you are. Blake stood to leave. Keep flying, document, keep healing. Keep showing people what is possible. After Blake departed, Adrian sat alone with his thoughts. The journey from contractor pilot to hiding corpsman to integrated operator had not been linear. It had been messy, painful, uncertain, but every step had been necessary. The guilt from Afghanistan would always be part of him. Those civilian casualties would never be forgotten. But he had learned to carry that weight while still moving forward. He had transformed guilt into purpose, shame into service, fear into courage. A year ago, Commander Reese had asked who could fly. Adrian had stood up, and in that moment of revelation, everything had changed. But the real change had not been external. It had been internal, accepting all parts of himself, integrating his experiences into a coherent whole, becoming someone who did not hide from the past, but learned from it. He climbed down from the cockpit and walked back toward the compound. Tomorrow he would teach another class, fly another training mission, continue building the bridge between capabilities that had once seemed incompatible. The quiet medic was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, wiser, more complete. Someone who had learned that true excellence was not about being the best at one thing. It was about integrating everything you were in a service that mattered. Adrian Kwan had found his calling, not as a pilot, not as a medic, but as both and something more. He was Bridge, the connector, the integrator, the proof that hidden capabilities revealed at the right moment could change everything. And he was just getting started. If you enjoyed this story and connected with Adrian's journey of hidden strength revealed, please drop a comment about your favorite moment or character. Maybe you know someone who has shown similar courage, hiding their capabilities until the moment they were needed most. Share your thoughts and let us know what resonated with you. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these stories of courage and transformation to life.